6:15. So, sorry. So with that, I shall call this meeting to order. And looks like, yes, we're all here, minus you all, in addition to Youth Commissioner Landon and our chiefs and Shannon. So are there any additions or modification to the agenda that anybody has? I have a couple, so I am going to jump in on that. I request that we amend the agenda to remove agenda items 6.01 and 6.02 from the agenda. I've talked to the city attorney and they have yet to review the misconduct release policy and the body worn camera release policy, so we cannot take action on those yet. Does anyone want to make a motion on those amendment changes? Shireen motions to. Do I have a second?
Second.
And Milo seconds it. All in favor of removing agenda items 6.01 and 6.02 from the agenda, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Aye. I believe that was unanimous. And and the second motion to the agenda, sorry, second amendment to the agenda is to add a presentation from Lacey Smith with regards to her position as the community affairs liaison, and to give a small presentation on the community assistance, intervention, and peacekeeping program that was, I believe, briefly mentioned sometime last week to the public. Do I have a motion for that amendment? Sorry, do I have someone to respond to that amendment? Shireen motions it. Anyone?
Yeah, and Commissioner Chair Gamache, I'd like to motion that we do that as early in the agenda as possible, since I see she's already in the queue. So is the soonest we do it after public forum, so we don't have to take up her whole evening?
I'm more than okay with that.
Okay.
So that would be between 3.01 and 4.01 on the agenda. Do I have anyone to make the motion? I think you raised your hand saying yes. Sorry.
That's all right.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Durfee seconds it. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Any other amendments to the agenda? Not seeing or hearing any. It moves on to agenda item 2.01, which is the approval of last meeting's minutes from 11/17/2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? Commissioner Durfee motions to accept the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a second? Commissioner Hart seconds it. All in favor of adopting the minutes from last meetings, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Aye. That passes unanimously. Moving on to public forum. And Shannon, is there anybody signed up for public forum today?
I did not have any requests. I do see someone with their hand raised. I'm not sure if.
Absolutely. If anyone out there in the public who's listening in on Zoom would like to say something in public forum, please raise your hand in the attendees list and Shannon will promote you so you can speak.
Okay, so this is a telephone number. If you would just state your name for us, and you may have to unmute yourself on your end. Caller on the phone, it's area code 254.
It looks like they are muted currently.
Yeah, they are. Oh,
Looks like
Hello?
looks like
Can you hear
yes,
me?
perfect. Yes. Can
We
you
can
just
hear
state
you.
your name for us?
Okay, sorry. My name is David Bidgen.
Perfect, David. Thank you.
Happy to have you.
Yes.
So this is public forum, and you have 2 minutes to.
Am I allowed to ask a question or make a comment?
Absolutely. You have 2 minutes. So yep, knock us out, sir.
Okay. Well, I just want to know, on behalf of the people and everyone in the area and around, if and when and what y'all are going to do about the BLM problem and the rioting and the looting and the uprising that's been happening to our country and the state of everything. I just want to know what y'all's position on this and what y'all are going to do, because they think they're going to defund the police, and I'm under the understanding that it's not, something that's going to happen, but I'd like to know what y'all's position is on it and how we're going to move forward here.
I would say that first, I looks like the caller left, but I was going to say that I don't believe BLM is looting and destroying property or whatever he was saying. But yeah, I think moving on. Thank you. Moving on, well, I guess this takes us to the amended part of the agenda of Community Affairs Liaison Lacey Smith. So, Shannon, do you mind promoting Miss Smith to a panelist?
Oh, hello. Hi,
How are you doing? Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. So I am here, I guess, to talk about, there's a radio in the background that's kind of distracting. Anybody?
Yeah.
Somebody mute. Thanks. I am here to talk a little bit about what it is that I do, what my role is with the department in the city of Burlington. I'm inclined to remind people that I work for the city because since I am at work, I work out of the police department, I work with the police department, people assume to think that that is the only thing that I do. So myself and the other social workers of the police department, because I'm one of, I would say 3 currently. No, yeah, I'm one of 3, and then we have a domestic violence officer who is a part of the team. So this brainchild was, CAPE was developed by us. And I think what's worth knowing, and I think, I thought long and hard about what what I would like you all to take away from just kind of what my job is and what I do. Kind of boils down to 3 things. I could talk about this for hours. So those of you who have talked to me independently know that you'll get stuck into conversations with me for hours, because this is really complex stuff. And you don't often hear from the lone social workers. You're usually hearing from everything else, everybody else. So to give a brief understanding of kind of what it is that I do, Community Affairs Liaison is really kind of police jargon for social worker. And it is really, I have or am involved in really any sort of civil issue that comes to the police department, from homelessness and neighbor disputes, any low-level civil issues, graffiti, vandalism. I am on the hiring panels. I'm a source of complaints for the community. I manage a policy on behalf of the city around camping on public land. So I have a very broad spectrum of things that I do. And I think what the immense amount of value that is in my job is the fact that it is different than the rest of the social worker positions that exist within the social service fabric. And the reason for that is because I work for the public. I work for the city. It's not and given that it's not a nonprofit, I have the fluidity, the flexibility, the autonomy to really fill gaps in a way that isn't really happening elsewhere, because all of the social services have created gaps. And so inherently what my job does is have a broad understanding of what the social service fabric is of the world, to include everything: housing, any sort of benefit, gosh, everything, mental health, developmental disabilities, the whole spectrum of wellness. I am a part of like larger comprehensive care teams where the need of one individual is so great that they can't just be done by one case manager. I am one of multiple case managers that are working with folks. So I think, and I can do that and kind of move in and out with my, basically based on how I assess the need. It's 100% autonomous in my world. And so I've never had a job coming from the nonprofit world where the level of accountability, independence, and personal responsibility far exceeds anything that I ever did in the nonprofit world. So this is really a gem that the city doesn't really, I think, doesn't understand, often misrepresents what I do in the media. And so I think it's really, I know that there's conversations out there around like, why should we have social workers at the police department? Like, can't they be other places? And I understand the rationale as to why. But I would argue that as long as the social services in our community continue to function as they are, then there will always be a need for social workers in the criminal justice system, because that wherever those gaps are throughout the social service system, those people inherently often cycle into the criminal justice system. So there needs to be people that are actively working on assisting people to get out and exit the system. And unfortunately, like, you have to be at the ground level working with the first responders, because they are often the people that are going to be there before the social services step in. So how do I bridge that gap? And that's really important to me, is that knowing where somebody is and knowing the delay before they get connected to social services, knowing that the social service like street outreach is going to say to them, I can get you connected to Howard Center, but I'll give you, that appointment's going to be Wednesday at 9 a.m. on Pine Street. So get yourself there. That's not how I function. And that's not how like I need to go to where you are. I want to know what it is that you need. If you don't want anything from me, I'm just going to call and say hello. We're just going to, it is about meeting people where they're at, and then building the trust that's necessary to help them slowly get to where it is that they want to go. So I think that there's also consideration needs to be put along the fact that like Burlingtonians voted for certain non-criminal behavior to have punitive enforcement approaches, like the noise ordinance where there's tickets, like other quality of life issues that have to do that, all like civil tickets are what gets issued. That means that there's enforcement to it. And that in itself is kind of contradictory to what everybody wants. Those are civil issues. They're not criminal. Police should not be responding to those. It should be people that are trying to build the relationships within the community so people can kind of try to help solve their own problems. But there's enforcement to this now because there are tickets attached to it. So I think those are the things that people have to understand when we talk about defunding. It really should be about how do we want to re-envision public safety and social workers, those, and kind of all of the other frontline people, not even necessarily police officers, are the ones that need to be basically at that ground level with working with dispatch and the department to meet people's needs that officers inherently shouldn't be meeting the needs, and they don't want to go anyway. That's not what they got. They didn't get into policing to issue noise tickets. So sorry, that was a lot. If you guys, I want to answer questions and I don't want to just ramble at you. So please feel free. I'm happy to.
Councilor Seguino.
Lacey, I want to follow up because you and I have had a conversation and we talked about the fact that you are situated at the police department. And I wonder if you could talk about why you think that's valuable as, you know, sort of fit to be physically at the police department rather than separated from the police department, and how that affects your autonomy in terms of doing your job.
So part of what CAPE did was actually kind of create a wing within the department. So we inherently have our own sort of space that allows for, you know, it basically entry, and there's its own entry into the building. It is secure from its own sense. So we don't share space with officers per se outside of the domestic violence officer. But I think it's essential because one, I mean, if they are working and gonna be, the hope is for them to be triaged. So the hope is that dispatch will be able to call these social workers and send them and send them off to wherever it is that they need to be. I think if there's one thing I know about this job, and if there's one thing that I know about social work in general, is that you're not going to get anywhere without collaboration, and you're not going to get anywhere without communication. And you can certainly do that by putting someone out on an island and putting them in the CJC, but inherently they're missing that just cross-pollination that comes from just somebody walking by in the wing being like, hey, do you know so-and-so? I'm working around with them this issue, but they brought up a homelessness issue. And then I can come in and be like, I can step in and I can help them get into the coordinated entry system. And I can walk them through the housing navigation process and you know, and hope, and with the end goal being getting housing. And so with, you know, with the CAPE team, we all have kind of our individual sort of responsibilities, but inherently people are complex. So it isn't until you're talking to them that you realize that there's other issues that other people can work on. And like I said, I mean, people could pick up the phone. It's not impossible if you put them out on an island, but I think you just are inherently losing the value of just the team, of the people that'll be surrounding them. And there isn't inherently anything like, I don't know how we think we're gonna resolve our issues if all we kind of do is continue to keep everybody in their boxes and say, you need to be over there because you can't hang out with them over there, because if there is, then we're concerned, you know, like those are the sorts of things that to me just feel more divisiveness. And the police need social workers, and they're the first to tell you, like, folks don't come and tell me what to do. They come and they ask me for advice and guidance and direction. It is not, I'm not under on anybody's thumb. I go and tell them what it is that I am doing with my time and what my intentions are and what my agenda is. And and it inherently isn't even an ask. It's really just like, this is what I'm doing. And I have built enough trust and respect and clout for them to know that, like, I'm going to do what I am saying to do. And I have the ability to make my own decisions, and it inherently will be for the benefit of the community. And if there isn't something, if I'm doing something wrong, the only person that is going to be held accountable is me, because I don't have a slew of people behind me. I don't have a slew of management above me. I have me. And so I'm going to think twice about the decisions I'm making. I'm going to think long and hard about my intentions, where things are coming from, why am I doing things, how am I reacting? Because ultimately it's my job, it's me that is going to be called to task if something goes wrong. And so it's also, I mean, the work is also trying and it's exhausting, and you need your people around you that are in the trenches with you, because it's the only way that you know, inherently helps you to not feel like, again, like you're alone and you're just getting, like, you know, flooded with things. And right now it's me and one other person and a gigantic wing all by myself. And so the hope is that there will be buzzing with social workers, and there will be kind of this back and forth of officers coming and saying like I got a call about a gentleman where the VNA is going to pull out of services for him. Doesn't mean he still doesn't need the VNA services. It means that they've decided that it's too much of a risk. So there's nobody to respond to this man in his house. It will come to the police because he calls the police often. It will fall to the fire department because he calls them when the VNA can't help. So I can't, I'm not, if I had another social worker, then inherently we could kind of pick this person up and be like, all right, how are we going to help get you? How are we going to advocate for those services not to leave you? Because it's not like your need didn't go away, because it's still there. But it's, yeah, I think it's a long way to answer your question, but it's just invaluable to have people be centrally located and not inherently creating an invisible wall by putting them out in an island.
Commissioner Durfee.
Hi, Lacey. Thank you for your service.
Hey, Karen.
Just wanted to ask a couple of logistical questions. Sounds like you answered one where there's only 2 of you, correct?
Yeah, there was another social worker, and that was the opiate policy manager, but she has since gone, and we did not fill that position. So it's me. And then the other social worker that I throw in there is the parallel justice / victim services, Anthony. He is, I would throw in as social worker. And then Mary McAllister is the victim advocate, which is specific to kind of like DV and SV. So that's it. There'd be 3 of us working on social related issues.
And so, and I don't know if this is for you or I'm trying to wrap my head around, there was a proposal around having a couple of more folks join the police department, social workers. I think the mayor was saying, you know, that needs to happen. Is that something that has not happened, is going to happen, still on the table? Where is that at?
From my understanding, there is still discussion about, I mean, people have issues with social workers being at the police department. So we're doing a fair amount of processing around that. I know people say that it's necessary, but it doesn't seem like, I don't think there's been any movement in the way of budget or anything like that. And I could use some help.
And I'll say the last question is so you're there, you're full time.
Yes.
Which is
just, I mean, I'm a regular like 8:30 to 5-er. I can go a little bit in both directions. But I'm running and yeah. And so much of my work has kind of like, again, because it's fluid, it started out with certain things and now it's kind of, homelessness has really been like the gap that I've found myself living in the most consistently.
Yeah, I think it's important just to ask those questions so people listening can understand, like, okay, it's you, and you know exactly, get a picture in their mind.
Yeah, thank you.
What's happening? All right, thank you very much.
DC LeBrecq, I saw your hand up before. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll actually let the chief go first and see if he was going to answer. No. I just want to say, like, yeah, when I hear, you know, when we talk of the CSLs, I envision more Lacey's that would be at the department, you know, working with her, helping her out, because she really is a one-person army right now. And I could talk for quite a while about her as well, and how much she adds to and takes off the plates of officers at you know, almost daily, and especially when it comes to like connecting those social services and just the broad spectrum of services she works with, is, you know, from the courts to COTS to like all the shelters to the homeless encampments. Really, you know, I guess when I heard the CSL positions, that's really what I envisioned would be some more Lacey's working in there. And, you know, she already has kind of established I believe, what it should look like, what the program should look like, and how to integrate it. And, I would, if that's what this turns out to be, I would look towards her really to be, training these people as they came in. I know they would come with degrees already in some of the fields, which would be a great thing, but she would be like the boots on the ground, day to day, like how this is all going to work together. And she really does, when she comes to me and asks me for something, like, I know she needs it. She's not, she will take and handle whatever she can up to a point. And if she needs an officer for something, she also has no problem coming and saying, like, this is why I've tried all these things and I need an officer with me for safety, or just, for another person being there to help her out. So I guess that was my 2 cents. And I'm really glad that they've kind of moved from where they were into this spot where and I concur with her 100%, like putting them together in this room. And when we looked around and where she wanted to move, like, it does allow to add more people in there, but the workspace is really nice that they can all communicate and work together. So I appreciate you letting me speak.
Thank you for that. And I believe I saw Chief Murat's hand raised earlier on.
Yes, and I'm really just going to echo a lot of what DC Lebrecht has said. I can't speak highly enough about the work that Lacey does, and have sung her praises frequently whenever I can. And frankly, the discussion about these CSL positions was frequently phrased as, we need another Lacey. We need another Lacey who's going to deal with things other than just homelessness. We need, again, to have a capacity to deal with the opioid epidemic and substance use disorder, and to make certain that the people who suffer from that are treated with humanely and with dignity, and that we have the capacity to do the kind of outreach that comes from police encounters, and that the information sharing is organic and is immediate because of that embedment in the police department, but nevertheless has immediate impacts on people who are in those situations. We also need a person who's going to deal with some of the things that Lacey does currently deal with, that are more routine kinds of mental health issues that are not mental health crises. These are not people who need a police response. They're not even people who are in the downtown corridor or out in the street who necessarily would require street outreach, nor are they people who are in a position of exhibiting immediate harm to themselves or others that would require, for example, something like first call. They fall into a place that is not police appropriate, is not necessarily a street outreach issue, although we do sometimes use street outreach resources to deal with them depending on the time of day and depending on whether or not they're out and about. But these are people who are frequent callers. And frankly, all of you and all the members of the city council have been sometimes the recipient of emails and communications from such folks, people who are high volume users of our city resources and need to be treated in certain ways and handled in certain ways that are appropriate and lawful and caring, and also are maximizing the systems that we do have available, and when possible, finding out whether there are gaps in those systems so that there can be alternatives that are developed for specific cases. This is what Lacey does all the time. And the police department's control of that is nominal. We work best together when she is able to have that kind of autonomy and be able to move through those cases. When I can walk in the morning after having gotten certain types of calls at night, or having certain emails in my inbox, and turn to her and say, hey, have you been following this? And inevitably she will say, yeah, we have. And yes, we've been noticing that that individual is changing, is spiraling, is having some problems right now. But the ability to have that coordinated immediately and organically with police services is what really drives home the value of having that here. Frankly, the community has long wanted the sense of saying either police need to be social workers, or they need to be more versed in social work, or we want social workers to be doing some of these things with the police. And the goalposts keep moving on us, because when we bring a social worker into the facility and into the system and really start developing a working rhythm that is effective and productive, then suddenly there's an effort to say, no, we don't want them to be based in the building. The practitioners who are talking about this and are seeing the benefits of how these things work almost universally say that this is the place to have those kinds of resources.
I think I would just like to add that, like, I don't know, police are gonna do less, but that doesn't resolve any of these issues, and or like for individuals, especially just given the nature of the systems that we're working with. So there has to be kind of a balance. Like we need a balance, and I think the social workers are inherently able to fill gaps in different ways that are not only just reactive but also preventative. And I think policing has no real ability to be preventative because all they're doing is being reactive, and they don't have time to be preventative. And the preventative positions we had, the community affairs officer, the domestic violence officer, like those are more the SROs. Those are all, in my mind, a lot of the work that they do is preventative. It's farther upstream. They have the ability to do reactive stuff, but their purpose is to be more preventative. And we've lost that. We've lost not the SROs, but the community affairs officer has been taken, and the DV officer is just like hanging on by a thread. So we need social workers that are not only going to be able to do the reactive stuff, but are trained to do a lot of the preventative stuff.
Director Dodson.
Thank you, Chair Gamache. Hello, everyone. Good to see you, Lacey. So if you'll all bear with me, and anyone who is on here who wants to correct me, please do. But I have an ulterior motive as a director of police transformation and as citizen. Kyle Dodson raised a family here, lives in Burlington. So here's the situation we have. These are facts. We budgeted 105 sworn officers, resolution to reduce that to 74, 92 at the time that the resolution went down, thereabouts, and 82, 81 effective currently. And that number's going down. So this conversation, because I have an interest in the commission understanding things to the best of their ability so the commission can weigh in and support this community in getting the things that all of us need. And this conversation seems to be very much part of that, because part of the question is we've had historically a set of occurrences in the city, events, things that the police respond to. That number will be down a little bit in 2020, but not nearly as significant as you might think. And the command has put out data that actually the most significant, the type 3 are up. But as we move into 2021, it seems reasonable to expect that with hopefully most things seem to point to the fact that we will open more at some point in 2021 than we have been, since pre-March. And with that opening and with the excitement people have to get out there and the pent up everything, we're probably going to have more things go down. So we're decreasing in resource at the time that we might argue some things need to happen. And there's a lot of conversation about how we fill that. So back to Lacey, I wonder if it might not be helpful if you could, in your opinion, Lacey, as objective as you can be, what is it that you do that a street worker doesn't? Currently, to the degree you're both trained, they're social worker, you're a social worker, they have relationships, you have relationships, very different. You work under different circumstances, but for the community's sake and for this commission, what is it that you can do with the same training underneath BPD that cannot be done? And then I was wondering if you could walk us, without giving us the names, but an actual case. Give us someone in the community that shows how you intervene, how that intervention actually supports community expectations, meaning that you intervene, and in the absence of you, maybe a uniformed gun-toting officer would intervene. And what latitude do you have to support that person in a way that it might look different if a uniformed officer were to do that same thing? And then that point where, but there's a limit, and sometimes you're involved and you're not enough, right? So is there a line? And because all this stuff has probably happened for you, but the community doesn't know. Walk us through what that actually looks like. I responded to this thing, and it seemed at this level, and I know the person, and things were going well, but then things kind of went sideways. and therefore it called for something else. Like we need to flesh out what's actually happening, because I feel like too many of the conversation are abstract. Boots on the ground. Walk us through it, please, Lacey.
Yes. So you had two questions. You wanted a story, which I can give, and then
Correct,
you also wanted, the difference between me and street outreach.
That's right, because people are saying, we'll
I know.
just get more street workers and have them work at Howard, and maybe that's the way to go, but no one understands why that's good or not good. What's at least your opinion on what we gain from that, or what we lose, or why that's not perhaps as simple as it seems?
Well, let me start off with saying, street outreach is valuable. They offer what they do for the department is invaluable. And so, but they have changed over time. So just to give some context, when I started, 5.5 years ago, they had the ability to not only just respond to dispatched calls, but to actually really kind of dig in with the individual, check on that, like look for calls of service, see that someone's called multiple times and that it's all kind of related to civil issues. And then they would almost like pick up the person and they would kind of take the point of contact, and they would build a relationship and a rapport, and then they would be able to just intervene when calls came in from the individual, and calls would inherently drop because they would have the relationship for the person to reach directly back out to them. What's changed for street outreach is that with their funding, kind of them losing funding in people, and they're a smaller team, they've pivoted. And so they are not able to respond as much as they have been historically. So they are much more involved in the broader picture of things. And so they respond to dispatched calls with officers or instead of officers, but that is generally specific to Burlington. It's Burlington, Greater Burlington. So they're located on Church Street, and that is where they kind of function out of. That is where their ground zero is. And so they will go to calls that the police department asks them to, but they're not going into someone's house to like check to see if, someone's so let's say someone overdoses. And part of what Jackie's position was, the other social worker prior to leaving, was that she'd go in the day, when she got in the morning, she would look to see if there was any overdose deaths. And we would do direct outreach based on just the fact that somebody had a really bad night the night before. And so we want to know if you're okay. And do you have everything you need? Have you thought about, what is it that, just know we're here. And so street outreach doesn't have the ability to do kind of, again, the preventative work where we are going out and doing the outreach that's necessary to encampments. Encampments really are not their gig. They are not going out and doing cold outreach to encampments. They will go if dispatch were to send them, if there's a reason for them to be there, but they are now more of a bridge to resources than actually kind of providing the service themselves and holding on to them. So they build relationships and rapport, but they are really meant to be a conduit to something else. I am also like that. However, there is nothing that dictates how long I am with a person, how long our relationship is, what I do with them. Like if I'm just calling to see if they need help doing laundry, I can do that. I don't have to have it's not ticking a box around what are your goals today? And, do you, I can make a referral to you to this place that you can go at 8:00, but I'm not going to offer you a ride. And I'm, I'm just going to let you know when it is and that you need to get yourself there. So I just think that what this community needs is really a low bar. We're going to come to you. We're going to go and just say to you, hey, I'm here. I'm a social worker. And if you want to just have coffee, then that's good. Do you need anything? Oh, you need some gloves? I can get you some gloves. And I just meet people where they're at. And inherently, a good example of that is a gentleman that I work with. And he lived long time homeless and was very much adamant about living on outside was his gig. That was it. And we dealt with him fairly regularly because his turf was City Hall Park. And then when City Hall Park closed, he moved and he sat right next to City Hall. And he's a super intelligent man who is very good at advocating his needs. and advocating for the homeless. And so I started connecting with him really just because he was camping down at the waterfront. And I really, when the park was closing, I started a conversation with him just around like just how he was and who he was, and continued to just check in with him because outside of City Hall is where he sat every day. And ultimately, he ended up having a medical issue, which resulted in him going to the hospital. I was able, because I work with the social workers at the hospital, they let me know because they knew I had a relationship with him. I visited him multiple times while he was up there. You know, there was no other social service provider at the time, so I was able to get Safe Harbor involved, who's still connected with him. He has since moved, you know, out of the hospital and wants housing. And because of a change in his circumstance, I have inherently, not only did I help get Safe Harbor involved, but, you know, we worked on the paperwork around housing. So he has a voucher and is about to get housed now. And I followed him, you know, during the beginning of COVID, when everything kind of started, I was trying to figure out, excuse me, if I wasn't going to be at the office and I wasn't going to be in Burlington at the time, like what was I going to do? Because I mean, and being a part of the homeless community and the services provided to them, you know, there was a need for motel outreach and for people to go into the motels and to help people essentially exit the motel system. And so just again, through my relationships, through my working with the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, I was able to get myself into a place to be able to provide the necessary service to help people move out of the motel and into permanent housing. So I can provide that service now, and that's simply because of the relationships that I've made. I worked with years for people to get on releases, to enter information into systems. And so, and I'm giving this gentleman a ride on Friday to go get to replace his ID. And this has been about 2.5 years now. And my role with him, I'm a part of, like, he's got a nurse case manager, he's got his other housing case manager, and then there's me, who is really just, I understand him, I know him, he trusts me. And so I have the ability to just, you know, his case managers call me when they want to deliver news to him that he might not like. So I'm the person that delivers the news. And I'm the person that they call in the moment of crisis. It's not their other social service providers, it's me. So I just think that through relationships and through being a part of these bigger collaborative teams, he's one example of multiple people that I work with that I have inherently am just a part of their lives in a different way than the social service providers are, because I don't come with expectations. I come to hear them out. I come to see how I can be helpful. And again, if it's advocacy, whatever it may be, if they just want to complain about something, then that's what I'm going to spend 2 hours doing of my day. I'm going to listen to them. And so again, it's invaluable because I don't have the same red tape. I don't have the constraints. I don't have the HIPAA and the whole, like, I can't talk to you, or I can't confirm or deny if I'm providing service to this person. I'm here because they've asked me to be here, and I'm going to continue to be there as long as they want me to be. And that's really kind of how I function. And I think that's the beauty of this. Does that answer any of your questions?
Yes, thanks, Lacey. I guess I would just say that, and just for the record, that question, perhaps depending on who is judging it, might seem like it was a setup that I was, setting you up to give the answer that I wanted. But I think that one of the big challenges is the community doesn't understand the complexities. I don't. I've spent, going on 2 months inside the building, but it's a complex organization with a lot of pieces, and we've got big decisions to make, and we don't have a lot of time to make those decisions. So I just want to echo and thank you for being here and sharing with us, and hopefully providing the commission and the community with insight so that we can, better make decisions about this. these difficult issues. And also, I think it's, just personally, it's wonderful that with regard to the conversation we're having now, here we have a woman of color who loves her job, who's out there every day. And I've heard nothing but good things about the things you do. And it seems like that's what we're asking for as a community, is people who have that. I have not heard of community members having bad interaction with you. It seems like you're a supportive resource for the community, and something that helps people in the way that I believe our community is asking to have happen. So I think it's great that you're out there.
Thank you. Well, I think that one of the things, for me, one of the a restorative practice, or like just a restorative thought, has to do with the fact that there is, intention is different than impact. And so I understand that like folks are really, the intentions that are out there, because, and I'm all for police reform. I am all for more social workers. I'm all for police not responding to things that they shouldn't be responding to. I just think that like how simple it seems to be discussed is what's the most concerning for me, because it is immensely complex. It is immensely gray. And I know, again, intention is different than impact. And I know that I've seen plenty of times within the social service world where they're well-intended people do well-intended things and inadvertently have a negative impact on their consumers because they created a box. And now we weed you out now by thinking that we're doing something well-intended. So I think it's just food for thought.
I just want to ask, can I ask a quick question? I just want to ask, what degree do you hold?
I just have a psych degree, and all of my training has been really related to social work and mediation. And I started out in the world of developmental services and have worked through basically the whole spectrum of family. And then ended up kind of doing crisis work, and also just work with people that were co-occurring. So both mental health and or substance abuse, or developmental disability and or substance use, or just kind of it all. Poverty, it all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Do you could you provide any further insight into the community assistance, intervention, and peacekeeping program that I've been hearing floated about, and maybe explain some of that to the public as well?
Yes. So CAPE, as we call ourselves, and I'm adamant about having a CAPE, just to throw that out there, because I consider us to be the real superheroes. So CAPE is the Community Assistance, Intervention, and Peacekeeping Programs. And basically, this is just all of the social services that already were in the police department. These people already existed. They've been doing their jobs for, some of them, 20 plus years. And we inherently were just, one of the biggest issues that we have are people don't know we exist. They don't know what service we provide. They don't know that we even are there. And so it felt important that it really we didn't need anybody. We didn't need any money to do this. We didn't need anything from anybody to say, how can we do our jobs better? And so the purpose of this, team is really to just be able to, put us out there to the public in a very concise and easy sort of way to understand what it is that we do and how we can help. So it varies between, there's myself as the community affairs liaison. There is like I said, the parallel justice victim services specialist, and he is actually a joint position between the Burlington Police Department and the Community Justice Center. There's the domestic violence advocate, and then there is the domestic violence officer. And then hopefully there will be, as what they're calling them, CSLs, community support liaisons. And those would be the kind of the folks that are responding to the in the moment, active call sort of stuff, instead of dispatching police officers. So, and I guess it's like anything civil, like, oh gosh, any sort of victim services of anybody that's been a victim of harm or a victim of crime. Anthony can help. The DV stuff, I think, is kind of pretty straightforward. And then I'm really the catch-all from, again, complaints to hiring to everything in between is me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Any commissioners have any further questions for Ms. Smith? Commissioner Hart.
Yeah. Hi, Lacey. Thanks for joining us. So you talked about, and I don't know if this is a question for you, but I'm gonna ask it. The fact that the department didn't replace the opioid. I don't know what her name is escaping me, but I don't know what her title was. But that we haven't replaced her. Is there a plan to do so, or?
To my knowledge, I don't believe there is a plan to replace Jackie. They were going to absorb her salary, right, Chief or DC Sullivan? Go right ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to add, at least initially, our plan was, and this came from Jackie herself, that she felt like we could create these CSL positions using her salary to fund these positions, and then have these social workers who would respond just as Lacey described. And she actually gave a great summary of also street outreach, because previously over the years, street outreach has been embedded with the police department. And again, all these positions are invaluable. They all have a great deal of autonomy. And really the police administration philosophy is, how can we support them? So if they have issues and they bring those issues to police administration, we just try to help facilitate any solutions that they feel are appropriate for these incidents or issues.
Thank you. Another question. So we heard, like you have in our discussions, we've heard pushback about the CSLs being situated at the department or with the department. So I'm wondering, in your experience, how has that played out at all for you? Are you perceived to be with the department, or are you perceived to be more generally with the city, or is it, I'm just wondering if that has played into your ability to support people.
So what I will say is that the people that I work with, no. Like I have, even the people that are staunch, like, I don't want, F the police and you're just, a spy or whatever it may be. I just will say, all right, I mean, I'm not there to, I'll show you. I'll just, through behavior, that's fine. You're allowed to think or believe whatever you want. I'm just going to continue to do me. And I think you'll see my intention in what I'm here to do. But like from the general public, absolutely. Like there have been plenty of people that I'm not allowed to have a voice at tables because I work for the police department. I'm not allowed. I mean, I must be under the thumb of the police department because my experience is an inherently a negative one, because I can't, God forbid I have autonomy and have the ability to ask questions and kind of push back if I need to. I think people just make the assumption that I'm just a pawn at times to push the police's agenda. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, I am so not that type of person. It's just the exact opposite. So while things have become more and more divisive within our community, as conversations have become more and more divisive, as these kind of echo chambers that we exist in these Zoom meetings where the same people show up every time, we are only hearing the same voices. And so, yeah, I've definitely been excluded because I work for the police department. I had to fight to get on the releases for the Homeless Alliance. That was years of me saying to people, showing up and being like, no, I don't care if your client has a warrant. Like I'm not a police officer. That's not inherently what I'm here to do. I will encourage them to turn themselves in and inform them of how to do it without having to even have officers involved, because there is a way to do it. But I am there to inherently try to help people get out of the system. I'm not actively trying to get anybody in the system. And so it's really unfortunate to me that I don't have the ability, that people have been kind of so like, no, we don't want to hear what she has to say because she works at the police department. It's probably one of the hardest things I've had to deal with, because it negates everything else about me. It negates that I'm a woman, and negates that I'm biracial, and negates everything. I'm not allowed to be a part of conversations because of where I sit. Not understanding that I work for the city of Burlington. I'm a public servant. I don't get to choose who I speak to. I don't get to choose which phone calls I answer. I don't get to choose which emails I answer. I work for the people, and therefore that's who I'm accountable to. And so if I will ask officers questions. I will ask if if something was professional or not. I will come to them with concerns. And I've never come across an incident where I've brought up a concern where it's fallen on deaf ears. So I don't have to do it often. But I think people are missing the boat by behaving as if everybody in our community we should all be heard. This is a community issue. And so we need multiple perspectives to inform our opinions and our understanding of what this community needs, and not just specific segments of the community. It is important to obviously, equity is important, and we should be raising the voice of the people that have often be pushed to the side. But when we choose one subsect over any other of the other ones that are equally, suffering, I think it just creates such issues within our community, just further divides us. Sorry, that was
No, I appreciate
bit of
that.
a
Thank you. Thanks for
tangent.
answering that.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have any further questions for Lacey Smith here?
Chair Gamache, I do see Commissioner Grant's hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Jump right in, Ms. Grant.
Thank you. Lacey, I would like to have a conversation with you at a different time. I have some ideas about, I don't want to say promoting your position, but I definitely hear loud and clear what you're saying in terms of people's incorrect assumptions about your position. So please feel free to reach out to me. And then a question I have regarding some of the things that you mentioned for this meeting. So it sounds like you've made it very clear that you're working independently,
mm-hmm.
even though your primary office is at the police station.
Yep.
And you don't feel that you could do your job better if you were based someplace else?
I mean, having done this for 5.5 years at this point, yes, I could do it anywhere. I mean, that's because, again, I know what I'm doing. But as somebody that's starting the job, and just the high degree of autonomy that you have in this job means that, you start it running. You're not you're going to get the training that you need, and then you're gone, and you are just expected to do. And so you have to do a lot of on the fly thinking. And when you're just trying to it's your first day and you don't have anybody to bounce anything off, and dispatch calls you and says, hey, can you go to 219 South Union for a neighbor dispute, and it just what we're told is people arguing. I can't even imagine when you would have access to the system and know, maybe I could go and see what the history is there, and what's the history of these people, and what am I walking into, and what, I think that all of that comes from exposure to somebody like me who has been doing it. And if you have them away from me, I can still do all of that on the phone. They're going to come to me, though. They're going to come to the department. and there's just no way around not working collaboratively. This won't work if we aren't functioning as a team, or it will, but there will be a lot more duplication of services. And so I mean, go ahead.
So you're saying that if you get a request to go someplace that you've never been before, you would use resources at the department in order to research the history of the location, mainly to verify that it's safe for you to go alone? Or
yeah, and I think it just gives context, yes, of like what you're walking into, because part of being dispatched is that you're like, dispatch is giving you the only information that they have. And if the caller's just calling saying like, my neighbor's being noisy and yelling at me because I asked them to be quiet, and that's it, and then they hang up, I want to see an officer. Like, I don't know how anybody, especially someone who hasn't really been doing this work, is going to feel totally comfortable just kind of being like, all right, I'm just going to go knock on someone's door and try to, I think that we have to function as a team, as social workers. They're not going to go by themselves to a call, like to a response like that. There has to be two of us. So I think that, again, I don't think it's impossible. And I think the Community Justice Center would be the most appropriate location, given there's already kind of this joint relationship between positions with the PD and the Community Justice Center. But I just feel like, again, like we're in a wing by ourselves. If social workers wanted to walk into the building and not encounter a police officer, they could do that. So it's, I think I don't have the worry because I will be involved, and it's like, it's part of their training and their kind of learning how to do their job is going to be from me. And I would understand what the concern would be if I was a community member and it was, and you're not me. And I get that there are always going to be people that are not comfortable coming to the police department. And 100%, and I still work with those people. They don't come to the building. I go to them. I'll go sit with them on the street corner. I will go to wherever alley they sleep in. I will go to their apartment. I still have those relationships. So I don't see it as a barrier because my world doesn't function in that department. My world is out in the community. But just because I have a home base where I leave my stuff doesn't mean that I don't feel it as it impedes my ability to do my job, because I don't really function out of there anyway.
okay, thank you. And then my last question is, you had mentioned something about there being discussions and lack of agreement with regards to funding for your position?
Not mine, no. I think it was around the CSLs.
Oh, okay, the CSLs.
Yeah,
Okay.
the new social workers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll be in touch.
Please, thank you.
Awesome. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any. Lacey, thank you so much for being here. I know I really appreciate this. I think other people appreciate this, and I know the public hopefully appreciated this as well. And look forward to seeing you sometime in the future.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate it. Bye.
Take care. All right. Moving on with the agenda, we're at item 4.01, which is the chief's report. See, we have 3 chiefs here. I don't know who's going to take it, but so whoever it is, take it away.
I think I'll take the first stab at it. Not that it's going to go on for too long. So I think the major thing that we have to report from the past month or so, since we last met just before Thanksgiving, is I presented numbers to you. I got them to you this time before the meeting, and actually we uploaded them to board docs and distributed. I'm happy to read those through, but I think that the request previously was that I try to get them to you earlier than the meeting, because really, who wants to hear me recite numbers? Those numbers are important, of course. They represent the work that the men and women here have done, but it's up on board docs and there for your perusal. for us, the biggest thing that occurred was this discussion of staffing, of getting our staffing picture out into the open fully. And these were things that I had presented from the beginning when we began our discussions about staffing in June, and in advance of the of the budget process, talked about what the kinds of staffing changes that were being envisioned, both by first the call-in of the Racial Justice Alliance, and then by the City Council, what that might cause and what sort of implications it would have. And then have been saying as much to this body in meetings as we've proceeded since that time. I've been keeping you apprised of our headcount of losses and departures, gave a little picture of some staffing issues, I think 2 sessions ago. I, on Wednesday, was on the Kurt Wright radio show last Wednesday and talked about some of these issues in advance of a presentation that we conducted for all media, invited you, invited the City Council as well, on Friday morning. And we presented a PowerPoint that discusses our staffing in pretty granular detail. And I think that it's a very friendly document for lay people as well, in that it really does spell out initially how the department is structured, how we distribute our staff across 24 hours and across 3 major sort of chains of operation, those being our road services, our patrol services, our airport obligation, and our detective services. And where the staffing is going based on departures that we've experienced, departures that we very reasonably anticipate happening, and ultimately departures that we have a certain amount of hypothesis about, and then retirements on top of that. And the fact that the number of officers eligible to retire by September of 2021 would bring us to a very low level. We are already at a staffing level that we have not seen in a couple decades. And so one of the things to talk about in that staffing presentation, and I encourage certainly anyone to go to it. I believe that I sent the document directly to all of you, but it is posted on the BPD website, on the city BPD website right at the top, and can be found. We also on our Facebook page posted a link to YouTube where we've put up the actual presentation itself. And I really encourage anyone who is interested to go see that, to look through it and get a sense of where we are. And where we are is that we're losing people, and more importantly, we're losing the roles that those people perform and the services that they provide. And some of the things that Lacey spoke about very eloquently have to do with this notion of prevention. And going back to 1829, and Sir Robert Peel and Director Dodson elbowed me and gave me a little bit of a hard time for bringing up Sir Robert Peel on the Kurt Wright radio show. But Sir Robert Peel was both a member of the British Parliament and the founder of the Metropolitan Police of London, and is really considered the father of modern policing. And he has a set of 9 rules, 9 principles from 1829. And it's probably apocryphal that he himself wrote them, but that doesn't matter. At this point, we're in the land of the man who shot Liberty Valance. When the legend becomes, when myth becomes legend, print the legend. So what we have here is a picture of all the way back to 1829, principles that guide policing. And the first and foremost of them, is that the basic mission for which the police exist is to prevent crime and disorder, not respond to it, prevent it. And what we have is a system that, thanks to a lot of things, cars and 911 and a lot of different kinds of technological advances, has become increasingly a responsive agency. And it really is, we judge ourselves, many agencies, by response times, by the volume of calls for service. But the real heart of the work is prevention. And our roles that are preventive are our CSOs, our SROs. Our SROs are school resource officers, our the DVPO, the domestic violence prevention officer, it's right there in the name, and our community affairs officer. In conjunction with, those are all sworn level 3 police officers. They carry firearms, they have arrest powers, although they don't, certainly the community affairs officer doesn't use those arrest powers with great frequency, nor do the SROs in the schools for that matter, but they have them. But they work in conjunction with people like Lacey, with people like our victims advocate, with people like the embedded victims advocate from the CJC. and they are able to do preventive work that prevents us having to send officers to calls down the road. And we are losing those positions because they are not the core capability of the agency, which is patrol. And as we contract with regard to headcount, we divert more and more of our resources as a percentage to patrol. And this is a loss to us. So that's something that I hope people will take advantage of and go see that document. We've made it as available as we can. We're going to continue to do so and try to prompt it, put out additional public notices that it's there to try to get as many people to look at it as possible, because I really think it's important for all of our neighbors to become part of this conversation. We've had incredibly impassioned people who are weighing in and making their feelings known, both in the summer and then much smaller numbers, but even more passionate members who were calling in to charter change committees, to this body, to the city council. But what that amounts to is it is a portion of our 44,000 residents here in Burlington. And we need to hear from all of those residents, because those residents have a stake in what's happening too. And the very probable loss of overnight coverage, of midnight coverage from 3 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. is going to extremely affect this city. And the people who are going to be affected by it need to understand that it's happening, and they need to weigh in order for us to find as many avenues forward as we can. Because without those voices at the table, we're going to be constrained to very specific paths, and those paths are not necessarily the ones that get us to a point of, again, being able to provide a public safety that works for all of us. I also want to take this time to talk a little bit about some training that's ongoing and some early pieces that we're coming into. We are going to be engaging in a racial equity training with a provider named Trest Loving, who came to us through a number of connections, has an exemplary resume, a lot of experience in this role. Director Dodson spoke with her as well prior to our officially engaging with her. And this is going to be an ongoing conversational process. It's not going to be single serving. It's going to be iterative. We're going to be working with her a lot, and she's going to be working in multiple stages through phases of planned programming, but also in each planned program with each part of our agency. So she's going to be conducting each in a number of times. She runs the Institute for Racial Equity, and she conducted a survey prior to engaging with us that was, I felt, pretty remarkable insofar as the kinds of openness that the men and women in this department had towards this topic and the willingness they had to engage in it. And frankly, that willingness is something that that encouraged her to actually engage with us. We are working really hard to address what we see as deficiencies in the training that is provided to police officers with regard to physical use of force in their Vermont Police Academy section of training. And instead, we are supplementing it, augmenting it, both in our post-basic training, although we don't have any officers in post-basic because we don't have any new officers, but also in our ongoing annual training. It is a form of training delivered by what's called Gracie University. It's based in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It is focused on grappling techniques that involve control holds that are far, far safer than strike-oriented control methods that are generally taught. It takes work. It takes time to be able to give officers that time to train and to learn those kinds of techniques that make it safer for the officers and for the subjects. And training is going to be tight with fewer officers. The fewer officers you have, the less ability you have to divert some of those officers into training for a day while you're still maintaining your presence to do your core roles. But it's something that we feel is really important and that we're taking a lead on to minimize the use of force in any encounter. And much of it is about de-escalation training, which is a component as well, but it's also training on its own through ICAT. I think that, we are also very eager to see what happens with our benchmark system and the new system that's been permitted to us by the City Council that is actually going to really be able to track both uses of force as well as other performance monitors that include the officers, whether or not they're having disciplinary issues, whether we see any kinds of patterns evolving in their conduct. And this is all on top of training that we've been doing for a long time. I'm excited about the training with Ms. Loving because it is iterative and it goes into a much more engaged and repeated kind of of process and engagement, something that becomes a real, hopefully two-way process for our officers. Because we've done a lot of training over the past, over the past 15 years, we've done 45, 47 different sessions of training that can be tracked, and they run the gamut from Arab and Muslim cultural awareness training, white privilege training, transgender training, bias-free policing training, policing diverse communities training, Nepali culture and language training, implicit bias training, the effort that Chief Del Pozo made to send officers to the Alabama Legacy Museum. These things have been happening for the past very number of years, 15 years, 47 plus trainings, 3 different types of training that works out to per year. And obviously, we still want to make sure that we are doing more, that we're learning more, that we're trying to stay as ahead of all these issues as possible. Because ultimately our desire is to make certain that we are serving the community the way the community wants to be served. And that brings me to one last piece, which is that making certain that these kinds of trainings work and making certain that the sort of things that Benchmark may track are being appropriately looked at and appropriately followed with regard to either discipline if necessary or with regard to policy changes if necessary is, I think, the next step, and making certain that we have adequate and strong civilian input is the key to that. And citizen input is tremendously important. And I truly believe that this body represents a real venue for that. And I want to make clear that I think that you all deserve a much greater sense of appreciation for the work that you do. These hours that we spend in these meetings, the hours that I spend talking to each of you individually or sometimes in groups with regard to specific requests you have, with complaints that come in through you that you ask to have evaluated and sent through our process and then brought back to you for final resolution so that you can see those resolutions and weigh in on them and shape them. I think that we can improve it further, this relationship. I think that we can do more about data release, and that includes, for example, the use of force reports that Deputy Chief Lebrecht started to present to you in our most recent executive session. It includes the document that we already made public for the Charter Change Committee, but that you have all seen, which is our complaints for the past 3 years and put forward, and that's going to be, we'll see that again. We can talk about making that fully public rather than presented in executive session. We talked about that in executive session previously, and I don't know that we came to a final conclusion about it. We can, I think that the idea of having this body presented with subpoena power and with the ability to conduct certain kinds of investigations when you believe that it's appropriate for those cases is something that is a positive move forward. I don't think it's going to be used very often. And frankly, I think you all might agree based on the volume of cases you've seen over the past several years for those of you who've been members for a while. But the ability to do it is what's important so that you can make that distinction for yourselves. And then recommendations based on a disciplinary matrix that I think all of us could build together based on the historic discipline that's been distributed, based on goals for discipline moving forward, based on making certain that it's consistent with the contract, with the law, with due process for employees, and with the rights of both employees and of those who need to have some kind of redress. And then that discipline matrix binds both the recommendations made by the body and by the chief, and the final decision made by the chief. I think that I'm hopeful that we can get this body camera policy that you discussed out. I'm hopeful that we can find the resources necessary for us to be able to comply with it. That is a concern of mine, that even once you release it, we will not necessarily be able to comply with it as written based on our current resources, but we can work on finding solutions to that. And I think that there is a lot to be done by this body and others. And I've had some conversations, for example, with Commissioner Grant around this, about making this body and its work and what you learn more available to the public at large, and letting the public into these processes better, making them aware of how these processes work. We are going to be offering for the very first time an online Citizens Police Academy. starting at the same time as the Police Academy has started in the past in January. And that Citizens Police Academy is something that some of you have gone through and I think found very fruitful and helpful in understanding what the job does. I want to say everybody in the city get that. As much as I want those 44,000 people as part of the conversation, I also want those 44,000 people to understand what we do here. And then the last but not least is I think that we can really start to take a look at some of the data that is coming out of the reports that we've produced, reports that others have produced, including Commissioner Seguino outside of the commission, and what Director Lowe's office is now producing. And I think that the commission is a venue for actually making some of those kinds of reviews, to take a look at that data and make determinations about, what are we going to do about this? Here are recommendations for that. And being able to confront and tackle those things that do remain to us, which are significant issues with regard to racial disparity in use of force, in arrest rate, and making certain that we're moving in the right direction on those. I believe that we are, especially on traffic. I think that movement has been clear and demonstrable on traffic over the past, if you look at the 8-year picture, it's one thing. If you look at the past 2 years, it's a very different picture, and that's a positive story. I think we could do the same with some others. And I believe that working with the police commission to make those things happen is the key to ensuring that we have police legitimacy in the form of the input of our neighbors and the clear role of our neighbors in all of these processes, so that we're working together to serve the community as best as we can.
Thank you for that. Any commissioners, any questions over any of that? Commissioner Hart.
Thank you, Chief. One of the things you talked about was the use of force reporting that DC LeBrecq was doing. And I think if we're talking about the same provision, we might be okay. I think our concern was the provision that required reports or updates to be in executive session, and that was in the oversight policy. Is that correct?
That is correct. That the role of the police commission in employee discipline that we passed together, or that you passed in August, on August 25th, does require that be done in executive session.
Okay. So here's the language that I'm seeing, but it is not the final draft, but I don't think this changed. But I think we might be okay with doing these without needing any more input from anyone. I'm reading from numbered paragraph 4 or section 4 in that policy. And it states that updates about complaints against employees will be shared with the commission in executive session. So we're not talking about complaints with DC LeBrecq. We're just talking about data about use of force cases. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I
That
think
is correct.
I'm sorry, there's just simply the use of force incidents that happened in that time period.
So I don't think we're limited in having that discussion in open meeting based on that language.
Sorry, but in 4, and if you go down, they're not lettered or numbered, but the fourth dash under 4 states that the chief of police or his or her designee will report to the police commission in executive session on a monthly basis regarding use of force incidents.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I see where you are. I was at the wrong spot. Yep. So we as a commission need to, it's our policy. So we simply need to, because I think we all agreed that we'd rather have that disclosed in public in open meeting. And we're not talking about individual employees. So we as a commission just need to change this policy to make that happen. Is that right? I guess I'm saying that to all of us. I think that's right, that it's our own policy. And so
True. Yeah,
I'm
that makes
willing
sense.
to.
And it's sorry.
No,
I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
the one day I don't have the city attorney with us for the actual meeting to answer this question.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think that I had thought I would confer with her. I think I may have said that I would try to connect with her on this. So maybe we should have that on the agenda for next month, that we revisit this provision and see if we can change it, which I think there's no reason we can't, but we should check with Eileen.
Will do. I agree with that.
Thank you, Chief. Sorry about that.
All right. Moving forward to on
Chair
the
Gamache,
agenda. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
Chair Gamache, if I may, sorry. Yeah, I have my
Sorry, I couldn't
hand
see
raised
it.
inside there. No worries. No, this was just a follow-up on Commissioner Hart's point. So I actually think that the easiest way to do this might just be for somebody to draft, given my understanding that there is nothing which prevents that particular discussion from happening in open session. It seems as though, and given that it doesn't seem as though there's any objection on anyone's part, either the commission or the chiefs, for that happening in open session, it seems to me as though the best thing to do would be for us to just draft essentially a new policy which fixes that part of it, and then once we have that new draft, we can then essentially kind of vet that draft by the city attorney, rather than kind of wait for the next session to have the initial conversation with the city attorney and then do another draft. And then we can just draft that now and then present that and say, does this, are there any problems with doing that? That might just speed up the process a little bit.
Sure. So I think it could be as easy as this. The paragraph currently states, the chief of police or his or her designee will report to the police commission in executive session on a monthly basis regarding any use of force incidents. It shall include demographic data about the officers and subjects such as gender, age, and race, and also provide a description of the incident. So we can change that to say the chief of police or his or her designee will report to the police commission in open meeting.
I agree with that modification. I think that we could take that draft to the attorney. Yeah.
Sorry, DC Sullivan.
Just to add some context to this conversation, I think the sticking point may be that traditionally these records were considered personal or personnel records within the police department that could lead to disciplinary action for employees, and hence these were never public records traditionally, but that philosophy has changed certainly with this administration currently. And so I would agree with the sentiment that that we all feel like we could discuss this in open forum rather than have it in executive session.
Thanks for that context.
Right.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is sorry, continue on.
I do see Commissioner Grant's
Yeah,
hand also
Commissioner
raised.
Grant.
Sorry, I can't see hands raised from my point of view. My apologies. I guess for Commissioner Hart and Grant, if you have something to say, please just chime in because I cannot see you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Didn't want to be rude when jumping in.
I understand, but I appreciate it.
I had a couple of things. So number one, just in terms, Chief, I disagree with you with regards to community feedback. I listen to a lot of these public forums, and yes, some of the same people call in, but I hear an awful lot of different people who call into the public forums. And I hear people from all wards calling into the public forums. So if there are people in Burlington, in our community, who aren't comfortable with certain suggestions that are being put forth, certain changes that are being made, they need to stand up and they need to speak for themselves, quite frankly. If they're being quiet and they're not saying anything and they choose not to express what they might feel is important to them, I'm not really sure you can, speak for them. They have to speak for themselves. And one of the reasons that we have so many people calling in to public forums and wanting these changes looked at and wanting processes looked at is because we've reached a real turning point. I was pretty shocked by some things, and I was like, wow, am I being really naive? And I was talking to a friend of mine, they're like, no, Milo, Burlington talks a good game. And yeah, Burlington talked a good game, but we talked the talk, but didn't walk the walk. And this is all come to a head. So I just want to make that very clear. If people are not happy with decisions that are being made and directions that new directions that people want to take, we are attacking and dealing with systems that a chunk of the community feel that are broken, and a chunk of the community feel that they've been victimized by, and a chunk of the community don't trust. And I'll say it over and over again, when you have part of the community that just doesn't trust police can't do their job properly. They cannot do public safety properly. So if you hear somebody complaining and they don't like all these ideas, then they need to jump on those public forums. So that was my first thing. Thank you for mentioning the things about communication, because I really still haven't felt that we could do, that we're doing enough to get information out to people about a variety of things. And I guess we'll be talking about that later. So I'll get more specific. That is on tonight's agenda, right? Yeah, so I'll jump on that a little bit later. But I just think that some of these processes and some, the RFPs we've gotten, I think, is it 6 so far? And we'll be discussing that at the next combination. Oh, we've gotten 10.
10.
Okay. That's great. That's great.
I flooded your inboxes today.
Okay. So I've got some reading to do. So that's great. We've got to go through that process. And when we go through that process, then we can we'll have information. I think we still don't have all the information that we need to have. And I hear your frustration, but I just feel you still have to roll with the process. And I think we have, I don't know. I guess my perspective of doom and gloom is a little bit different than yours might be, Chief. And with regards to, I'm glad to hear that there's some more bias training. Off this meeting, I'd be interested in you emailing out some information about the person you said that would be doing the next round of bias training. I am super, super interested in seeing the survey that the officers completed that you mentioned. I would love to read that and read the results if that can be made possible. And that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Milo. Do we have any other further questions? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Durfee.
I just want to make a comment. I hear you, Commissioner Grant, and I hear you, Chief Murad. I also hear from a lot of people, not just because I'm a police commissioner, whatever, I have many hats. People are getting texted at 11:48 at night being asked to comment on public forum. I listened to the last city council meeting, and I have to talk to people who are upset because that's the time that they could get on. So I just really need to say that, because that people, we have no public forum, which I'm actually pretty surprised at this meeting that we don't have public forum. But I think that after a city council meeting that went, on and on and on Monday, there's really nothing left to say. And I do agree that people need to stand up and speak for themselves. But I also know that there are a lot of people that cannot stay up that late, and a lot of people who don't really get on police commission meetings. They want to get on the city council meetings. They want to get on, other meetings. And so I think that's an issue in terms of hearing people and meeting people where they're at, which I really like. You're not going to get everybody, in this, I like the term echo chambers that Lacey used. We're kidding ourselves. We think you're hearing from everybody. And then also, I will say, the city council up until recently, and maybe still does, prioritize voices of color. And so I myself have called Max Tracy and asked, please you know, let people, when they call in, you know, just let's have people of color, but let's have, you're not going to get the whole community if you say, okay, well, you can only speak if you're this, and you can only speak if you're that. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, somebody needs to say something about that. And, you know, while I absolutely, as a woman of color, want to be heard, you know, it is my responsibility to say, okay, well, I didn't get heard on that meeting, I'm going to go to this meeting. I can't get heard on this, so I'm going to join the police commission. I can't be heard on this, I'm going to do this. I mean, it's equal, you know, 50-50, but I'm not going to agree that, you know, oh, okay, well, if I get on a public forum, I'm going to be heard. I mean, recently, since June, that's not always the case. So I just want to put that out there. You know, we do have, you know, five whole people listening tonight, and you know, it's just the other side of the coin. So while it's your responsibility to speak out, this forum doesn't exactly give. If you don't have the internet, you're not getting on. You're not talking. So, you know, if I get mail, which I did get to my house, you know, then snail mail, emails, all of that, you know, we don't talk about the emails we get as a police commission from here either. So there's a lot of voices that aren't really being heard. And a lot of it's due to, you know, the COVID restrictions, but a lot of it's due to, you know, this is a charged issue. And, you know, telling people, hey, you know, if you want to get heard, you know, get on public forum sometimes just doesn't work.
Okay, well, given the impression that we're being given that there's so many people out there that really disagree, I think we could hear more in public forum. And I also feel that, you know, maybe we need to be, people can email. We don't get a lot of emails, but I know some of the city councilors get emails. So people could definitely be communicating that way. And then also part of just overall improving of communication and community engagement, we could get more people involved. But I do believe because I've heard this before, and I just don't feel, I just feel that there are ways for the supposed numbers of people that are out there that are really against some of the stuff that's going on, that more of them could make themselves heard. And definitely you know, having on tonight too is hard after having such a long, you know, I was up last night and I was listening to as much of the meeting as I could, and it's hard. And I agree that it's hard, but part of the communication thing that we'll get to a little bit later is putting ourselves out there more, and finding different ways to collect feedback. But I just feel that I don't like that we just got lectured. That really bothered me because that's the way I felt. All due respect, Chief, I felt like you were lecturing us, and I felt like sometimes you get frustrated. I understand why you get frustrated and you get a little dismissive. So that is also my response to that. Your opinion about your point about talking to Max about saying at this point, do we need to, when we have these long meetings, continue to do that prioritization? That's a valid point. That's a valid point. If people feel that, you know, they're waiting and they don't need to come on. And also when the city council sometimes starts to argue about if they're going to continue to allow their public forum, and they spend 30 minutes to 40 minutes arguing about, are they going to continue to have public forum when they could have continued to have people speaking, because they always end up continuing the public forum. I mean, it's definitely some things that need to be worked out for sure.
Point of information, I didn't say that there was a groundswell of other kinds of opinion. I stated that I wanted more voices in it to hear from a variety of voices. I didn't presuppose what those other voices would or would not say. I simply said that I think that more of our 44,000 residents need to be involved. And I agree with you that they are not being involved, and that they do need to make their voices heard and known.
I said the Max Tracy thing. I just want to, I don't know if you said that, but points well taken.
Sorry. Thank you, everybody. Moving on, we are going to go to agenda item 5.01, which is the use of force report presented by the Innovation Technology Department. I believe I saw Ms. Stetson in the attendees. If we can make her a panelist. Awesome. Thank you. And hi, Ms. Stetson. Thanks for joining us. And please take it away.
I think Brian Lowe is also here. He was hoping to present as well. Oh, he's here. He's the city of Burlington. There we go.
Sorry. When we get promoted, we lose about 10 seconds. So I missed everything that happened after Chair Gamache started introducing the item.
Oh, I was just saying thanks for being here, and we appreciate you being here, taking your time out of the day, and please take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, Chair Gamache. Nancy, Nancy, do you want me to kick us off with the slides, and then I'll turn it over to you?
Sure. Do you have them? All set?
I can pull them up. Yep.
Okay.
So we have a short slide deck to share with you, and can you see this okay, Chair Gamache? Okay, and I'm not able to see everybody's. Can you hear us okay?
Okay, we can.
Okay, and when I'm sharing the screen, I can't actually see everybody, so please interrupt me at any point. I think a quick word of context, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, but I'm here tonight because in the budget process to begin this current fiscal year, the mayor and council moved Nancy's position to the INT department. So Nancy is now the city analyst and is reporting on issues related to crime and police activity across the city, but also other issues across the city, and is helping lead our wastewater surveillance program as well related to the city's COVID response. There are basically three things we're hoping to communicate tonight. One is we think it is important to standardize reporting in how our department reports back to you. And we want to make sure that we get kind of clear direction from the police commission about how you want reports and when you want them. We have a proposal for you, but we'd like your feedback on that. We think this is important because currently effectively the city produces sequentially reports around arrests, traffic stops, and use of force. These are reports of significant public interest, and they're reports that are interrelated from my perspective, as an outsider outside the police department, who's tracking some of this data. We think it might be more productive for us to report these out at one time all together to the commission so you can see trends across those different domains and potentially other issues as well. The second thing we want to talk about is we've produced, thanks to Nancy's work, a public dashboard that now tracks information related to these trends and is updated on a monthly basis. So we'd like to do an annual report to the commission, but we also want to make sure you have access to data on a rolling basis going forward whenever you want it. And then the third piece is we want to do an update, an addendum to the use of force report that the police department proactively put out last year that covered 2012 to 2018. We'd like to cover 2019 and 2020 through October 31st, just as the kind of final, to me, the piece that proves the point, like this is a use of force report coming to you not linked to the traffic data or arrest data. And we think those things should be connected, to go back to that first main point. So those three things, the requesting guidance on standardizing our reporting to you, showing you this public dashboard that's now available, and giving you the 2019 and 2020 addendum. It's been very helpful to work with the police department on this. This is obviously a relatively new area for our department. They've been extremely forthcoming in providing us data and helped make this dashboard possible. Obviously, Nancy's work has been kind of the key piece here, and so I want to turn it over to her to speak about the dashboard. The last thing I'll say, just to be explicit, is the proposal that we're hoping to come to you with is an annual report that covers these issues that would be the second quarter of 2021 and the second quarter of every year thereafter. Nancy, why don't I turn it over to you to speak to the dashboard?
Sure. So yeah, I think you're going to have to advance. Yeah, there you go. So I put together this dashboard as a way, partly inspired actually by Murad's reports he does every month. And I think a few meetings ago, there was a mention of that it would be nice to have this data all in one place, which I knew we could definitely do. So it just covers the data that I usually put out in these reports, but instead of putting out the data once a year, like sort of as I get to it, I just set up a process so that it comes out every month. So this dashboard will cover, it has five areas right now: recent incidents, trends, traffic stops, arrests, and use of force. So it covers, what we look at in these reports generally. The data files, like if you want to actually download the data, you can still do that, but I've moved those data files to the open data portal that covers the entire city. So those are in a different place, but they're still accessible, and they're now updated through for incidents and arrests. They're through the previous month, and traffic and use of force need a little more review, so they have a 1 month lag. So those data sets are through October 31st now. Brian, if you want to. So the dashboard is more fun if you're actually looking at it on a computer. I just want to do screenshots for simplicity. Oh.
Here, this will be a little easier to see, Nancy, sorry.
Oh, okay. But I just wanted to walk you through it so you can see, how you use it. The first page is just police activity that's happened in the most recent calendar month. So the default shows this November. You can click on any of the, a lot of the charts are interactive. So if you click on burglaries, the map will just show burglaries of the month. You can also, this is just a selected list of activities that you might be interested in, but you can pick any of the call types that the police respond to, and you can see how many there were, and then you can change the date range too. And so you can click through and pick what you want to see and see what the police have been responding to. Brian, if you want to go to the next one. Next, we just have trends over time. You can see that calls are down a lot in 2020. Again, you can pick your own filters if you want to look at particular types of calls or where the call came from, if it came from a phone call or 911. You can pick, if you're interested in a particular ward, you can choose just to look at one ward. You can also select the severity of the call. So the different types that Chief Murad has talked about, type 1 through 3. On the next slide, we have arrests. Again, more of the same. With arrests, the main filter is the charge. You can pick what arrest you want to see, who's been arrested by demographics for that charge. And again, you can sort of filter through. Next, we have traffic stops, which tracks a lot of the same things that I would report on in the traffic report. Traffic stops by race. You can see who got tickets and filter through them, and also where the traffic stops happened and what the traffic stops were for. And finally, we have use of force, which I'll talk about more of the results in detail here. But again, you can filter through all these variables to pick what sort of analysis you want to do, what you want to look at. I don't know if anyone has quick questions about the dashboard. We want to jump in, or we want to wait till the end? Maybe not.
Oh, do we want to wait till the end?
Oh, no, if your question now, go right ahead.
So in terms of the screenshots that you just showed, you're saying that these are screenshots that we should be able to see on the dashboard?
They're just screenshots of the dashboard itself.
And the dashboard's live?
Yes, it's on the police data page right now.
Okay, so how exactly do I get to that? Like when I'm on the homepage of the city's website, I do see the icon for open data.
Okay, so don't go there. So that's good feedback. Maybe we can put
those things are linked so that you can get to it from either location.
But if you go to the police department page, you can do that by the department header.
Departments, yep, and police
department.
Okay.
Yep. And then on the side panel, there is, I think it's reports and data.
Yep.
and it will be right there. And then it works best if you sort of blow it up to full screen. So there's a link there to do that.
Okay, using this link.
Yes.
All right.
So feel free to
that looks
play around with it.
much better. Okay. Got it. Because when I read your presentation, and it definitely implied that the dashboard was active, but I could only get to the old one.
Milo is
Okay.
just
yeah,
council.
yeah, I didn't set it to be live. And Kyle,
Commissioner.
you're not on mute.
I think, Kyle, you're not
Director
muted.
Dodson,
Yes.
You're not
I think
muted.
you're live, sir. Your mic, there you
Oops.
go.
Yeah, so I made the dashboard live this morning.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. This looks much better. Much better. I will definitely be reviewing it in more detail, because the old one was just not user friendly at all. And some of the options were really dated. So
Yes.
I look forward to checking this out. Thank you very much.
I think one thing to emphasize is that it'll report with about a monthly lag, so it'll be updated every month. And just so commissioners are aware, there is some time that we need to keep it up to date, but that should be a monthly report. And the theory that we would love your feedback on is, if you have this dashboard that is updating monthly in this way, we think we should also present to you some kind of annual report that pulls together trends around use of force, arrests, and traffic stops. But we think that that should be done once annually at one of your meetings with all those trends together at once for your kind of review. And then you have the dashboard at any point if you need it during the year.
Does the dashboard just go monthly, or can you look at information quarterly? Or do you have to do a quarterly report to get that information?
If you want to look at the incident counts, you can set that timing to whatever you want. So you can look at whatever date range you're looking for. Most of the charts are either by year or by month.
Awesome. Does anybody have any further questions at this point in regards to the use of force report?
I can put up some slides that give you kind of quickly some details on what that report, the highlights of that report as well, because the reporting that we're hoping to do. I want to make sure. Can you see?
Your PowerPoint is just one of the tabs.
Okay. Sorry, folks. Yeah,
There it is.
yeah. So basically I think there are a couple highlights from the use of force reports from 2019 into 2020 that we should make sure to share with you. All this information will be available on the dashboard as well, but I think it's important to highlight a couple different things. Number one, overall, total use of force incidents are going down, and the total number of people involved in use of force incidents are going down. I want to highlight, though, that where you see this 149 with an asterisk next to it at the far right-hand side, that's because 2020 hasn't totally finished yet. And so the downward trend here is accentuated in a way that's not accurate. This is including data up through October 31st. If it were truly year-over-year data, that number would be slightly higher. But you can see that the trend lines are generally going down. The other interesting findings that we have, for your awareness, take it for what you will. Use of force incidents are concentrated in the downtown, and they are concentrated late at night in the city. That is probably not surprising, but we wanted to make sure to share that. Another interesting finding is that white individuals are more likely to be injured in use of force incident than Black individuals in Burlington. And while the number of Black Burlingtonians upon whom force is used has gone down since 2017, the total percentage of Black Burlingtonians who have force used on them is holding steady at about 26%. Nancy, I should turn it over to you for some of the details on these slides.
Sure. Yeah, I'll walk through. The Brian covered the main conclusions. So these two charts show you both the number of Black use of force subjects compared to their percentage of the total, and you can see that generally 1 in 4 use of force incidents involves a Black subject, and that ratio has stayed somewhat stable over the past few years. The other pattern we've seen, and we saw this in the past report too, that use of force, it really is concentrated in the downtown area. That map is small, I know, but most of those incidents are happening like right in the downtown core. The police department, splits up the city into 5 sections, and the downtown area gets by far the most use of force incidents happening there. And it's generally late at night and those early mornings. So the next chart also shows this even more clearly. If you look at both the time of day and the day of the week that police officers use force, there's a strong concentration in those early morning hours on Saturday and Sunday. If you take out incidents that happen in the D area and just look at other parts of the city, that pattern isn't nearly as strong, and you see that there in other places in the city there's not as much use of force happening, but it's at all times of day. So there's this real like core problem that's happening in the downtown area, and then outside of that it's more mixed. The other piece that we looked at that was a follow-up again from the past report was when firearms are pointed. So what this chart shows is the gray area is all incidents that happen where a firearm was not pointed. The dark blue is when a firearm was pointed but no other force was used, and then the light blue is sort of the in-between where there was both a firearm pointed and some other type of force. And Black subjects are more likely to have a firearm pointed at them than white subjects of force. And in incidents where there was a firearm pointed, 37% of subjects were Black. So that is higher than their general portion of all subjects of force. So it's something we've noticed that this seems to be happening more to Black people in Burlington than to white people in general. The next slide, we also looked at injuries associated with force. This is sort of a proxy to try to figure out sort of how severe the force is. And, we've seen that the number of subjects injured is generally around, 15 to 20% in any given year. And the numbers are pretty small, but white people do seem to be more likely to be injured than Black people in this data. And so that is like the quick summary. You guys have the full report, I think. So I'm happy to ask or answer any questions you have.
Sorry, just a super quick question. I know about the Black population in Vermont, but what is it in Burlington? Are you familiar with that or no?
Yes, it's about 4.5%. But
in
I'm
Burlington?
Sure Professor, yes.
Sorry, you're muted, Commissioner.
It's about 6% in Burlington.
In Burlington? Thank you.
Chair Gamache, I'd be happy to make some comments.
Absolutely, be my guest.
I have several comments on the report itself, but then a broader issue. I want to just encourage you to revise the first part of this report, in which you say that Burlington is alone in providing these kind of data reports. That is really inaccurate. A number of other agencies do, and certainly the Vermont State Police. I don't think we are leaders in this. I mean, I appreciate that the department does them and that you're producing those, but there are a number of other agencies that are in fact doing this work. My comments really are more substantive than that. And I'd like to say a few things so that the public who watches this will be able to extract some things from this report. Blacks in Burlington are roughly 6% of the population. They are 28% of the people against whom force is used. That is 400% greater than their share of the population. And there has been, with regard to Blacks in terms of the percentage of people who a gun is pointed at, that is 525% greater than their share of the population. And these are astounding disparities. And I think they speak to why the community is feeling the way that it does today. I personally, I'll be honest with you that I think that the tone of this report, that it doesn't identify this as a critical problem, but in some ways minimizes it in the language that you use, does not do a service to you or to the community. I have read your use of force reports in the past and your arrest memo from June. And in those reports, especially in, I think it was the last year's, the 2019 use of force report, what came across to the reader is that you justified the disparities in use of force because Blacks are also a high percentage of people who are arrested. And you make the analogy that, well, you know, they're roughly 25% of the people that are arrested and they're 28% of the people against whom force is used. There is bias in arrest rates as well. We know that arrests are influenced by bias, so we can't justify use of force disparities using arrest rate ratios. And I'm sort of apoplectic at the disparity and the lack of response to this as a critical problem, as evidence of racial bias. There's a great deal of research on what causes this to happen, why guns are more frequently pointed at Blacks. And that has a lot to do with negative stereotypes that we as a culture have with regards to African Americans, perceiving them as more criminal or more threatening and so on and so forth. So police officers have bias, as do we all. I'm not suggesting that somehow police officers are different than the rest of us. We have all drank this toxic chemical for a very long period of time. But the police have a special responsibility to, when they see numbers like this, sound the alarm and dig in and find out where the problem is. I'm glad that you're doing racial bias training, but again, I want to just compare you to the Vermont State Police, which in June put out a report on its traffic stops showing wide disparities in search rates. And they themselves acknowledge the problem. They bent over backwards to say, we have a serious problem and this is what we're doing to address it. And I think that that's what this community wants from this police department in Burlington as well, especially when they see these kinds of numbers. I have a few other comments, so they're not as serious, and I'll let others, oh, actually, let me just make a couple of comments. One of them is that, one of the things that's so interesting to me is, I'm looking at my notes, so that's why I'm looking away, that you say that most of the use of force incidents are downtown at night. And it's interesting because that population is, in my understanding, my experience being downtown late at night, is that it's predominantly college students or overwhelmingly white. So again, the disparity is all the more shocking, if you will. I want to just, if I'm going to say a wonky thing to Nancy Stetson here with regard to statistics, but I think it's important. In the injury table, I didn't see tests for statistical significance. And in fact, if you do them, the injury rate between Blacks and whites is not statistically significant. And so, you know, I think it's therefore problematic to say that whites are more likely to be injured. Statistically speaking, actually, it's within the margin of error. So I just encourage us to do the deep work and to honestly present the data, not to try to justify it or to minimize it, because I think that creates more animosity than it does goodwill. And Chair Gamache, when you're ready, I have a motion.
Be my guest.
Yeah. So I'd like to move to request the Chief of Police to present a report to the Police Commission that outlines the Chief's strategy to reduce and ultimately eliminate racial disparities in use of force, with a timeline to be presented to the Commission no later than the February Commission meeting.
I second that.
Okay. Floor open for discussion. Is that Mila? Are you chiming in for a comment or discussion?
Yes, I just want to say that I really agree with what was just said. The 37% number just made my head explode. And the fact, the point that when we're talking about the downtown area at these specific times where these incidents are occurring, and it's overwhelmingly younger white people, this has to be deep dived. So yes, I also wholeheartedly agree with the motion. Thank you.
Mr. Lowe, I'll get to you in 1 second. Sorry, I just want to take care of this motion first, and we'll get to you. Any further discussion on the motion on the table that's been seconded?
A quick comment. I would just, I don't know whether this is a suggestion to amend the motion or not. I'm happy to vote on it as it is. I would just, the only thing I would be cautious about is I don't know quite what the baseline is, by which I mean, I wouldn't want to presuppose that the appropriate level of use of force incidents across the population is going to be just strictly proportional to the percentage of people in the city. That does not seem, because I mean, part of the question is, what is going to be the input to certain kinds of police interactions, and that's not necessarily going to be evenly attributed across all members of the city. So I would I'm reluctant to just presuppose prior to looking at exactly what makes up each police interaction that the appropriate level should be proportional to membership in the city overall. I certainly think that, as I said, that the disparity is something that ought to be looked at and addressed. And so I'm happy to request, a strategy to improve those disparities. But I would be concerned about the suggestion in the request that if it is not brought down to 6%, then it is flawed or problematic, just because I'm not sure that is what the appropriate baseline would be. And I want to look more into that particular number specifically.
Commissioner Seguino?
I'm happy to respond to that. First of all, one of the things that you're likely to see in the data is that whether it's traffic stops or whatever, it's never going to be exactly proportional to the benchmark each year. There'll always be fluctuation, 1 year up, 1 year down, so on and so forth. But also, truthfully, we also don't know the dynamics of the city over time. But I think that it is important for us to identify this as a goal to work towards. And maybe this will be modified if we have a better understanding of the use of force over time. But I think that we have to at least identify this as a goal that we want to move towards and develop our understanding as we do that.
Right. So just to clarify, again, the goal ought to be to reduce bias and discrepancy in applications of force. And then the question would be, what is the best indication that there is in fact such bias discrepancy? And I think that suggesting that even a prima facie sign that there's bias discrepancy is any incident rate higher than 6% or 4.5% or whatever the current Black population is of Burlington, I think is not. I think that that's a slightly faster way of looking at it. But like I said, but I'm not denying at all that there are disparities that ought to be addressed. It's just the question is, what is the sign that there is no more disparity and that there's no more bias in application? I think that looking at the population rates is not, I think, the best metric for that, is my impression.
Youth Commissioner Nipper.
If I'm not wrong, just speaking on what Randall said, if it was 6%, even if they got it down to 6%, and I could be reading this wrong because I was just listening, obviously, while I was doing something. Wouldn't 6% still mean that the majority of population of Black Burlington people were still getting use of force? So, that's the whole population almost, right? Am I wrong? If it's at 6%.
it means 6% of the use of force incidents, right? So if they're 6% of the population, we'd expect them more or less to be 6% of the use of force victims.
So would that be, I'm sorry, would that be a majority? I'm sorry, would that be a majority of the Black population or no? I'm sorry.
Not necessarily.
Not
Maybe I can help
necessarily.
out, Stephanie. I think the challenge it seems like you might be having, Landon, if we were to say that
Sorry.
6% of the people, that there were 6% of Burlingtonians who had use of force instances, and then if we said that all of those people were Black, then it would be true.
Sorry,
That
yep.
it would be all the, that all the incidences were all Black folks, because 6% of the use was also connected to 6% of the population. But this is different. This is 6% of all the people, 40,000 were in these instances. And then of those, a certain percentage were Black folks.
Gotcha. That's COVID schooling. I don't know. That's on me. My bad.
Don't need to
Slipping through the cracks.
apologize.
Another way to, if I can jump in, another way to think about it is, that the population of Black people in Burlington, Professor Guino, Commissioner Seguino, you can absolutely correct me, but I believe it's around 2,000 people. And then in the 2018 or 2019 and 2020, it was like around 50 Black people had force used against them. So that's sort of the ratio we're looking at.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Sorry, Commissioner Seguino.
Just to respond to Commissioner Harp's comment, maybe what I could do is amend the motion to delete the phrase "and eliminated." Would that be helpful?
I believe it would, yes.
Okay, then I'd amend it to delete the phrase "and eliminated."
So I guess for sake of clarity, do you want to just resubmit the motion with the amendment in it?
Yeah, you mean to read it again, or?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Move to request that the Chief of Police present a report to the Police Commission that outlines the chief's strategy to reduce racial disparities in use of force, with a timeline for actions to be presented to the commission no later than the February Police Commission meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Jacques. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? I am not hearing any. All in favor for this motion, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I believe that was unanimous. And yep, that passes unanimously. And I'm sorry, back to you, Mr. Lowe. I saw your hand. I didn't forget you had your hand raised up before.
That's fine. The comment I was going to be made was made, and I do have a question for the commission still on the table that I'd like to go back to if that's possible. But I don't know the kind of order of events here. So
no, absolutely.
We do still need guidance from the commission around the timeline for reporting. One of the things that we are not comfortable with is, if it would be helpful, I think, as city staff to have a clear set of expectations about when these reports are requested. And I think an annual report is something that we should be producing, and it should be all these different measures at the same time. But I think I am uncomfortable making that decision independently. I would like to have some kind of clear direction from the commission on that.
I would love a quarterly report with year-to-date information.
I think the other consideration, Commissioner Rand, I hear you there, is Nancy is now the city analyst running not just crime data, but all, right now, currently, there's nobody else doing any data reporting in the city. So I don't know that a quarterly report is realistic. But if that is the commission's desire at the end of the day, I certainly can take it back to the mayor and see if that's something we can do.
If I may, so I mean, given that the data is very helpfully being uploaded to the dashboard, that data is now being made available. I am happy with a less frequent report. In particular, I'm happy with a yearly report, given that I'm able to run those analyses as I want along the way. So I'm happy with the yearly report and combining all those different modalities of analysis. I'm happy to request that. I think the proposal that you put forward was a useful one, but I'm happy to defer to the other commissioners as well.
Commissioner Durfee, followed by Director Dotson.
Sorry, am I muted? Oh. I concur with Commissioner Harp. And I also, we haven't voted, we voted on a motion that will, to me, in the forefront is the use of force, and annual report seems doable for the city. Thank you, Nancy and Brian, for bringing this forward and asking for direction. I think annual is good with me.
I believe it was Commissioner Dawson, followed by Commissioner Seguino.
I would welcome others to weigh in on this, because this comment is about clarification and hopefully moving us forward. My observation has been that for the last several years, 4 to 5 years, one of the most robust and active collectors and analyzers of police traffic stop, police use of force data has been Professor Seguino, or at least she gets a lot of the press, and she's doing conferences and talking. When you hear about these numbers, it's often Professor Seguino. From my perspective, I don't think we've developed a clear enough procedure here in Burlington for dealing with this. My sense is that, as Director Lowe just said, that he and Nancy are sort of these, is more the technical work in the city of doing all sorts of data. And I'm not, it could be that it's their, that it should be their responsibility, but in my conversations with them, I'm not so sure they understood their role was to focus in on disparities and amplify them and do that. They were, it seemed like they were just like, here it is, here's the data. And I don't know if it's the police commission, if it's the police department, but it seems like there could be more clarity on whose specific function it is to look at the disparities and then really dig in. I will say that there was a, you know, I was gonna do it offline, but I think it's worth doing it here. There was an internal conversation with me and the command, and we had a conversation about the data that I thought began or created the seed for a fruitful discussion about race and about bias. And the chief was responsive to it. I pushed back on a reading of the data, and we had a good conversation, and he thought and welcomed an opportunity to dig deeper. And I think, because at the end of the day, right, it's phenomenal. We have disparity. And so it makes sense to understand what that disparity is about. And, you know, depending on who you are, you might make excuses. So let's say, for example, someone says, well, there's more, hopefully no one's going to just stop and not deal with the disparity. So someone says, okay, well, we have more Black folks who are impacted by these situations because there's Blacks behave differently when they interact with the police. So I would say, okay, so as humans, they behave in a certain way in these interactions. Well, then why don't we examine the possibility that white cops behave differently in these interactions? And if that's the case, then we've got something to look at, because they're the professionals. And if one set of human beings is impacted by the dynamics of our society, and we would argue that that set of human beings has some sort of way of showing up in these instances that was impacted by their experiences and by the environment and by history, well, then another set of humans has the same likelihood of being impacted such. And that, to me, seems like a really fruitful discussion, because I would hope as a community, we want to understand disparities and not just kind of say, well, you know, I guess that's just what happens and move on. So I guess I'm inquiring with the commission what your thoughts are about what our mechanism should be for having a structural, moving forward way of dealing with this, because I might argue that traffic stop, arrest, and use of force might be more helpful to us in bias than the complaints and the discipline, because those numbers are so small. The reports I have from 16 to 20, the complaints were, I don't think there was a year that the top like 50 or 60 complaints. Whereas here we have hundreds and hundreds, just more data. It can help us, I think, see patterns of bias. So if we want to understand bias, I think this is a place to look. And I don't think we have yet the robust systems to interrogate and investigate these disparities. And I think it might serve us well to put a lot of attention there, not to in any way say that the complaints and the discipline issues as it relates to individual experiences that people complain about isn't important, but this data, it strikes me, might be more consistent and give us an ability to do the kinds of understanding of the nature of bias in our police work that we are looking to do.
Thank you and appreciate your comments.
Commissioner Grant has a hand, and I have a hand as well, and I think there are other commissioners that have hands. So, but I want to defer. I think Commissioner Grant had her hand up raised in the chat before me.
Thank you. One of the reasons that I would like a quarterly report done is that I feel we need to be making more of an effort of getting this information out. So one of the things that we can do with the report is get it out to the public. And I think once a year during these times is really not enough. Having it done in the format that you've presented is something that's quick and easy for people to go to. I'm interested in the dashboard. I'll go to the dashboard. I will search and play around with it, but some people might not do that, but they might take a quick look at that report. It's also something, I'm getting to some of the things I wanted to discuss later, but I'd be interested in having it discussed more in local, commercial, and community media. So that's why I'm thinking quarterly. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Chair.
No,
please, thank you. So yeah, I mean, so the only thing I was going to say is, first, I think the data are public, and that's already the most important thing, right? You know, the fact that it is released makes the data public, and the analyses that constitute these reports, at least so far as I've seen, like that's not difficult analyses, right? You know, obviously, no shade on Nancy or Brian for your work, but this is not difficult stuff to do. So the fact that the data are already out there means that anybody can do that sort of work at any frequency that they want to. If we wanted somebody to compile that sort of report on a quarterly basis, we could do so. The question is, do we want to task basically, you know, kind of the central city office, which is responsible for gathering data across the city, with giving us this report every 3 months, or do we want to just kind of have access to the data ourselves? And so, right, so that's why kind of my view is the most important thing is making sure that the data are public, and then, you know, any analysis that we want to run on that we can do, or we can ask someone to do it. And so I prefer to kind of make sure we have the option of running those analyses rather than asking those analyses to be done for us at certain periods of time, especially when that's kind of, I think, more frequent than it needs to be. That's my perspective.
I would respectfully disagree. I just really feel from my conversations with people in the community, no matter where people stand with regards to how they feel about the police department, they really don't have a firm understanding of exactly what's going on. So I can see what you're saying about maybe having somebody else put together a report, and then we would need to discuss like what would we want that format to be and who would be putting together that report. I don't necessarily want to volunteer to do it because I have a lot of plans to do a lot of other things. So I would like to have something done and presented to me, and then I can work on getting it out with other people. So I don't know, Mr. Dobson, maybe that's something you could help us with. If, you know, where we could, I don't know, do it within the commission, find a volunteer to do it for the commission. So if you have any ideas, much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to weigh in. My comments were more, and I am working with the chief, and Commissioner Seguino and I talk often, as well as Nancy and Brian, to try to set up a structure, right? So I think that is an appropriate role for me. We want this procedure that we put in place to last much longer than the Director of Police Transformation role. So I think setting it up and having clarity and a reporting structure, the frequency, as people here are talking about, and who receives it, and how it gets picked apart is important. And that work is ongoing, Commissioner Grant, in terms of trying to figure that out. Director Lowe and Ms. Stetson have been reaching out to me to try to have those meetings to figure that out. So we hope to at least have suggestions for how we think might be a robust way for processes to be set up that help support this activity.
Commissioner Durfee, followed by Commissioner Seguino.
I'll yield my time.
I'd be happy to volunteer to take the discussion of the commissioners, follow up with everybody, and come back with the next meeting with a proposal that responds to the request for a timetable for reports. It might also be helpful to give me the opportunity to also talk to Chief Murad and Director Dodson about some of the data issues as well.
Stetson.
I was just going to jump in to say that I'm not totally opposed to a quarterly report. As the more bare bones it is, the more automated it can be. I can set up charts to run that, you know, that they go and you have the data result that you need every quarter. I think one thing we have been talking about is not feeling confident that we are going to be looking at the metrics and ideas that you want us to be looking at. And so if the commission has certain things they want to see and can make a list of them, it is possible to set up a super basic report that you know spits out those statistics.
If I may, just one additional thing, which is this is not actually an argument against quarterly reports per se. It's just given seasonal variability, I worry that also that you can get some kind of, you might get misleading results if you just look from a kind of quarter to quarter look at how the data are moving, because, you know, for example, you might get seasonal effects of things around New Year's or Christmas, and if you just say, oh, like this quarter it's down, this quarter it's up, that will hide some of that data. And yearly reports are much more able to balance out those kinds of seasonal variability. But that's, like I said, but that's not an objection to getting the reports quarterly. That's just a worry about how we would interpret the results that we would get.
Well, that can also be part of the discussion of the reports as well. The point would be to be talking about this more and having people have a better understanding of what is going on, because I look at it also along with you know, the other types of calls as well. It's part of a fuller picture. Thank you.
Would something maybe like 3 quarterly reports that are very, you know, kind of a more snapshotty-esque, and then maybe like one in-depth yearly one, would that kind of cover all bases?
And as far as I'm concerned, that's the worst option for me. But obviously, like I will do as told, and you can tell me what sort of reports to make. But in a lot of ways, actually, an automated quarterly report is the easiest for me, because I can just press a button and make it go. Whereas a more involved yearly report with discussion and more in depth is a substantial amount of work. Sorry.
All right. So yeah, we've heard a couple ideas here moving forward.
Could I just emphasize one last thing? I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair Gamache.
Absolutely.
it is very helpful for us to hear the metrics of interest to the police commission. This is a new responsibility in the Innovation and Technology Department that we were not looking for, in the sense of the police budget has been moved and changed. And so now our department is taking on this responsibility. It's a very important responsibility. I think as tonight shows, and I think, you know, I hear what Commissioner Seguino said, like, we have a lot of learning to do as well. You know, it would be very helpful to hear which specific metrics are of interest to you, because we would like to produce those metrics. And I don't know that our misunderstandings or misguesses about what you're most focused on are unexpected in this process. So, you know, I hear Nancy saying that she can set up a bare bones report. That will only work if we can set up the metrics that are of interest to the commission. So we may need to do some offline discussion as well, potentially with Commissioner Seguino, if you're open to it, to make sure that what we produce is actually what is relevant and useful to your discussions. I don't know how that will impact your timeline in terms of the February discussion, but I think it would be prudent for us to maybe discuss some of that at some point as well.
I believe the things that are highlighted, use of force, traffic stops, and arrests are definitely my big three. Anybody else have other metrics they would like to put in there? Please, please present them.
Well, if I
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, no, quite all right. Mila, go.
So the chief's monthly report, which is a snapshot of the various types of calls that are responded to, is that something that's under your purview now? Do you generate that report for him?
I generate that myself. I generate that myself every twice a month. Once for you all on the police commission based on the date of the police commission meeting, and once for Twitter and posting it there at the end of each month. So the month. And it's run from a straight run directly from Valcor, and it's labor intensive. It's not automated. And what Nancy now has is we're seeing some discrepancies between them, but that's going to happen. Sometimes data comes in at different times, comes in different ways, but ultimately I'll probably give those up based on the fact that the dashboard exists.
And one other potentially helpful clarifying point, what I meant by metrics there, I should have been more specific. Professor Seguino pointed out the demographic information relative to the percent of use of force cases. That's a really important metric. I understand the point that was made. We should emphasize that in our reports. If there's other specific requests like that, I want to make sure we're listening to those as well. And I don't mean to put people on the spot immediately here. I definitely hear you, Chair Gamache, on the kind of use of force, traffic, and arrests need to continue to be the focus of our work.
We definitely want to be looking at these disparities, these racial disparities, the gender disparities that we see, and we want to understand, you know, where those are coming from.
Commissioner Hart.
Thank you. I actually just want to take Commissioner Seguino up on her offer to take the lead on this in terms of working on the metrics with Nancy, with Brian, with the chief, with Kyle Dodson. So if she's willing, I would feel, I certainly don't have the expertise, and I appreciate that Commissioner Seguino does.
Director Dodson.
Yeah, as we move through this, I just would want to remind everyone that hopefully, although I can't remember if it was identified specifically in the RFP, I would hope that the consultant who comes in to help us with the assessment of the BPD might be helpful here. I would imagine there are any number of communities nationwide who have grappled with this, wanted to figure out a robust way of looking at these data and helping to make reforms to the way policing is done. So in the conversations that we have with this expert who we're going to hire, I would hope we can get some insights, just some best practices and some lessons learned around the country with other communities, which I am sure are grappling with this exact question. So when we get that up and running, hopefully that's one of the things that we can glean from that experience.
Thank you. All right. So So I guess moving forward, I guess what is the best plan of action here? I guess we'll continue looking. We'll figure this out and maybe get back to you. If I'm hearing this correctly, is this Shireen? Are you going to help with Stephanie meet up with Nancy and Brian to figure out the metrics that we want to use for this? Is that what I'm understanding you're saying? Correct.
I was just agreeing that I would support Commissioner Seguino. I would be very supportive of her expertise on
My
this
apologies.
because I lack it, and I would really get in the way, frankly.
So Chair Gamache, I could, work on this, taking into consideration all of the commissioners' comments and have these conversations and come back with a proposal for the January meeting for the commission to vote on.
I'm personally happy. I'm personally okay with that. Other commissioners' thoughts? Any objections?
Sounds great to me.
I'm not hearing any, so yeah, that'd be much appreciated, Commissioner Seguino. And I guess, do we have anything more from either Ms. Stetson or Mr. Lowe?
No.
Awesome. I thank you guys very, very much for being with us at this late hour, presenting us this information. It's very much appreciated for me, and I believe the other commissioners and the public as well too. And we will deliberate on this our next meeting, which I believe is tentatively for January 19th. So yeah, we'll be in contact shortly there afterwards. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you, Professor Seguino.
All right, moving on. We struck agenda item 6.01 and 2 from the agenda, so it moves us to 6.03, which is S119, which just got passed in the legislature. I believe this was going to be an information session from the chiefs, explain to us the law and how it's probably going to affect the department, I believe. Was that it, correct? No?
If that, I am not prepared to do that tonight. I apologize. I don't know that I knew that was on the agenda, and I'm very sorry that this wasn't intentional on my part, but I'm not, yeah, we didn't, I am recalling it now. I'm afraid that I don't have that prepared.
So that's okay. Yeah, it was on the last agenda, but then meeting went so late that we moved that part to the next meeting. But I can relate anecdotally that there are a number of changes that are going on. Former Chief Morrison is actually working on a number of them with Commissioner Sherling. There are issues with regard to a statewide, they're attempting to create statewide model policies for use of force that comport with the new use of force standards in the law. They are working on statewide model policies for body cameras, the usage of and the release policies of. They are working on potential new training regimes that work with the new requirements about use of force. There is discussion at the state level of oversight that sort of echoes and may ultimately supersede the kind of oversight that is envisioned, for example, by last night's charter change proposal. But there are a number of avenues going on. I apologize for not having prepared more and being able to give it to you in greater depth and specificity. Thank you. So that moves us on then to agenda item 6.04, which is community communication discussion. And I believe this is where Commissioner Grant, if you want to take it away.
Hi, so thank you for this time. As I mentioned before, I've had discussions with some of you individually. I've had discussions with the chief and other people, and I have discussions in the community overall. What I feel is, I know we've got RFPs out, and some of the first RFP, the people that we've selected have already started their work. But what I'm thinking about are things that can start to be done now, or, set up now in the new year, where we are doing things in the community that become part of the community landscape. As I mentioned earlier, I find talking to a variety of people that they don't really have a firm understanding of what the police department does, what type of calls are involved. And part of that is education. And then I hear on public forums where, people don't know the officers in the community, for example. And then we were just discussing stats. So just since it's getting late, I just want to say in a nutshell that these are the things that I'd like to see us work on. We do not have a consistent presence at the MPA meetings, and I think that would be good for us. Sometimes the city councilors will talk about work that is going on in the commission. And I have seen commissioners at some of the MPA meetings in the past, but we really should make sure that someone is appearing at the MPA meetings for all the wards, asking for 5 minutes and talking about the work that we do, letting the public know how they can get in touch with us. It's just one avenue of getting information out. There's also ways to get more information out using commercial media, and that can be commercial radio stations or commercial news stations. And there's a lot of things that can be done through, I'm on the board at the Media Factory. I also do a radio show through the Media Factory. So I'm aware of the equipment and materials that they have available to do production. And we don't, we can do it in a COVID safe way. We can bring cameras to different locations, doing interviews with officers, where people can, meet an officer to get to know who's on their force. We hear the same names all the time. It would be good to focus on some officers that they don't know their name and they're not fully aware of what they're doing in the community. Getting out stats on a regular basis. And let me see, I just don't want to be too repetitive. We kind of talked on some of these other items when we were just reviewing other things throughout the meeting. But that's what I was thinking. And I was thinking that I could be a launch pad. And if we set up something where we say to local news stations, and we say, we have human interest around the police department and engagement with the community. Can we, if we present certain ideas to you, can we get you to do a segment once a month? And if we are approaching all of them and everybody's doing a little bit of something, and if we're producing public service announcements as well, what can you do in your community to help the police department? Doing public service announcements. I remember last month, one of the complaints had to do with parking. Well, parking's no longer in the police department. So how do we make sure everybody in the city knows you've got a parking issue, you've got to go to DPW now? When it would be appropriate to contact the police department to report certain incidents that might not actually require a presence of a police officer, but someone in the community wants the police department to be aware that something happened just for tracking purposes, that type of education. So that is kind of it in a nutshell. If anyone has any questions.
I do. You're muted, Jabu. I think you're motioning towards me.
Yes, I am, Commissioner DeVue.
I think these are all great ideas. I have not spoken to you, Commissioner Grant. I have not been one of those people that you've spoken with, but I do agree that there's a lack of, first of all, people, we're in a situation where a lot of people are misinformed about the police commission.
Yes.
I agree. I can 100% agree. We did hear from a caller. One of the things that I thought was a great idea was the pictures on the website, and the name, the names of the officers. I mean, that's a small, that's such a small ask. I just want to know who you are. Unless you're a detective, I should know who you are. I should know what your face looks like. And one of the callers, I think it was, I'm going to mispronounce her last name, but her first name was Zoe, and she's called in a couple of times, and I've emailed her, and I think she's emailed the commission. So, it's a lot less intimidating for folks who are not, fans of the police, to know who people are, to see people named. And then I think the NPAs are a great idea. I will be joining the steering committee in the North District, because I think that's really important. And it's hard, to get people out there. So I think, I come from a business that does a lot of production too, and we get a lot of earned media. And so, what can we do during these times to say, for example, there was a lot of misinformation around the racial justice resolution. There's always a lot of misinformation that if people knew, I think we could, garner some support, for the police, and sort of start taking down the barriers of, fear of the police. And so I've been waiting for this report, and I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say about that.
Yeah, no, Commissioner Grant and I've talked a little bit prior to this meeting about this, and I think it's honestly a wonderful idea. And as she, I think, phrased it perfectly before, it's, the police have a hard time doing their job when people don't trust in them. And I think that this is one step to kind of start fostering that trust, and at least knowing who our neighbors are, and knowing who the police are that are policing us. Well, I'm fully in favor, and like I said before, I'd love to help in any way I can. So let me know. Anybody else further with any questions or comments?
Commissioner Grant, do you need some support with this? Are you just taking it to the streets yourself? What would you like for support from your fellow commissioners, if any?
Sure. Well, I would love, you could all email me individually and just say what aspect you might be interested in and what amount of time that you would have available. Because along with doing little spotlights on police officers, I think it'd be great to do little spotlights on us as well, and offer our perspectives on what the commission is and what the commission does, and the direction that we're taking. Because the even just some of the email feedback that we had gotten, people's perception of what the commission isn't really in fact what we are, and what we do, and what we see our messages. And then hopefully we can develop where we're putting out information, but we're encouraging people to give us more information, bringing more people into the process.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
So your email, you'll email us, or would you like, I'll just email you with my thoughts on that. Each commissioner can email you. Is that correct?
That would be great.
Okay, great. Okay.
That would
We'll
be great.
emailing you shortly.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other further comments or questions, discussions on 6.04? Not seeing any, and not seeing any hands raised. So moving on to agenda item 7.01, commendations that have been received. Over to you, Shannon.
So I am going to leave my video off. My internet is pretty spotty. I did put up for y'all to see just a commendation that was received regarding stabbing incident that happened here recently, and an officer rendering aid immediately and using actually his own supplies that he had, purchased on his own, and the quick response from the officers on that case to work through interviews and with other officers on scene and securing evidence that was kind of not a correct or particular path forward. And so that was the one that I had to share with you.
Thank you for that. And all right.
If I may, I just
Sorry.
have to, I think I just sent it to all of you, but I did want to point out that our newest sergeant, Dwayne Mellis, was awarded a very prestigious award, the Investigative Achievement Award by the U.S. Attorney's Office just today. And it's a big deal. It was based on work that he did as a member of the DEA task force on a big case, a very large case involving an individual who was trafficking large amounts of multiple types of drugs through the dark web on Alpha Bay. And Dwayne is a sergeant now. Sergeant Mellis is on patrol now. We're very lucky to have him, but he did a lot of exemplary work on that case and was recognized by our federal partners for it today, the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Awesome. Thank you for that update. All right, up next is agenda item 8.01, Commissioner updates and or comments. And I am not seeing or hearing any. Moving on to agenda number 9.01, next meeting agenda items. We have the use the misconduct policy that got the two agenda items that got pushed to next meeting. We have just the updated role of police commission for reports to do. And am I missing anything?
Did you want to?
I think sorry, Commissioner Durfee.
Do we want to hear S119 updates? Are we good with what it's in process?
That's a good question. Yeah, floor is open. Do we want to hear a more robust update with that? And I guess before we take that, DC Sullivan.
I was just going to add in regard to S119 that is going to be pretty fluid. It is going to be something that the legislature is going to be working on this next legislative session. And so although there may be current updates, again, it's going to be so fluid that I don't know that it'll project where it's going to land eventually. So
yeah, and that was, sorry, I don't mean to speak out of turn. That was my assumption because I do know it's going to be ongoing. I just wanted to make sure that we remember to circle back to that item.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Commissioner Hart.
Presuming we get the okay from City Attorney Blackwood, then I would think that DC Lebrecht could provide the use of force update at that meeting as well. It would become a monthly report, I would think. Once we get the go ahead, so we could put a placeholder on there for next month's agenda in case we have that straightened out and vote on our policy.
I agree.
I agree as well. All right then. And just so I state it again, because I've been bad at this, our next meeting is tentatively for January 19th, third Tuesday of the month. And moving on to agenda item 10.01. I request that we go into executive session to discuss a couple of things. Update with the city attorney who I just texted and who will be joining us for an update on the Melly Brothers lawsuit. And I have a couple of questions about the William Dunn investigation. Anybody else for reasons to enter executive session?
I'm sorry, just a quick question with respect to your questions about the investigation. Those questions, are those speaking to potential disciplinary matters, or I just want to make sure that it's properly something which is subject to executive session?
Yeah, no, I guess I just have some personal questions with regards to the case, and I was just unsure if by speaking about them, if it jeopardized the investigation at all. That was my only concern. Did that answer the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Commissioner Hart, do you have handy the permissible reasons for entering executive session?
Oh, you want the exact wording? Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, again, I just want to dot the i's and cross the t's that this is something which is permissible, and I thought you might have it handy, but if not, I can look it up also.
Yeah, sorry, I don't. I'm just looking up the statute, and that might take me a minute.
My rationale is that it's an ongoing investigation, so the subject of this investigation isn't privy to the public, so that was my rationale.
So I'm looking it up right now. Just again, like I said, I just want to make sure that given that there have been questions about this, yep, I'll get you.
I understand. I was just letting you know where I'm coming from.
Are you looking at 313, Commissioner Hart?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Disciplinary or dismissal action against a public officer or employee.
The discussion of material that is exempt from public records, from the Public Records Act, is also permissible for entering executive session. So it might be that an ongoing investigation is something which is exempt from Public Records Act request, and so it could be something that could be discussed in executive session.
So is that does it sound like it's okay then to enter executive session for that reason?
Or if there's a specific finding that the premature public knowledge would put the state municipality or other public body at a substantial disadvantage, but they would have to actually make that specific finding. So it seems like it might be one of those two reasons. Again, like I said, I'm not sure exactly what, I'm kind of deferring to you, Chair, because I'm not sure exactly what the questions are that you have, but it seems though if the questions are kind of discussing something which is exempt from a public records law, or if it's something which, for which the discussion would place the public at substantial disadvantage, then executive session is permitted. Or obviously, if it's the evaluation of a public officer or employee, those are I think the three things that might be justifiable reasons to enter executive session for just kind of general questions about an investigation, or again, if it's a potential disciplinary matter as well, that's usually what we enter executive session for. Is it's something that I'm concerned that there might be a disciplinary concern there. I'd like to have those potential disciplinary concerns addressed. So I'm guessing that your question would fall into one of those categories. I'm just not sure which they would be.
Well, in that case, then I'll just scrap it, and I can just, I guess, phone one of the chiefs and
no, I think you don't have to do that, Chair Gamache. I think if you just represent that it that if you specify that it has to do with disciplinary or dismissal action against a public officer, that would be, it sounds to me like that is the basis for what you're seeking in going
That's what it
into
sounds like.
executive session.
Yeah, I agree
Okay.
with.
Because we
Mr.
also
Chairman.
have the complaint list that I think it's DC Sullivan usually goes over that was distributed in our executive session notice.
That's
So-
true. So we do have to go over that, but I do want to be clear that I don't believe that the chair is suggesting that there's anything in this that is about officer conduct or something that would be of a level that would cause discipline, much less dismissal. I think the chair is
No, it's
simply
not.
seeking information about an ongoing investigation that is ongoing.
Yeah,
Correct.
I don't recognize it by the name, so I apologize. I was thinking of a certain case, so I must be mistaken.
Given that it is ongoing, I assume that would mean that the disclosure of that investigation would put this body at substantial disadvantage. Would that be correct?
Well,
I'm not a
I'm
lawyer.
not certain about that. This is not an investigation into officer conduct. This is an investigation into a crime. The name that the chair mentioned is a person involved in a crime that occurred. We have an ongoing investigation into that crime, multiple witnesses, multiple subjects, and it is in fact associated with a commendation that Ms. Trammell listed with an officer who frankly saved a life at that incident by applying chest pressure devices to a person who had been stabbed multiple times. So it's an ongoing case. It's something that we are in the midst of investigating. I'm not entirely certain about the protocols for discussing it, even in executive session. It's not something that we necessarily have done in the past when it doesn't involve officer issues or discipline. If Chair Gamache has an issue with officer conduct involved in it, then of course it becomes purview for us to discuss. If it's a question about the incident itself, owing to knowing people involved in the incident, I don't know that that's the case.
Like I said, in that case, I'm more than happy to withdraw that, and yeah, we'll leave it at that. So yes, I move to go to executive session to discuss the Melly Brothers lawsuits with the city attorney that'll be joining us shortly, and any disciplinary measures that are arising.
Is there anything public that can be said about the Melly lawsuit?
I do not know, and the city attorney's not here with us, so
Okay.
they can't answer that right now. I'm sorry. Yes,
If
I
that
make
was
a
a
motion.
motion, I second the motion.
Any discussions over that? Not seeing any. All in favor of entering an executive session to discuss disciplinary measures and the Melly Brothers lawsuit, raise your hand and say aye.
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 That it passes unanimously. After executive session, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
You mute.
You're muted, Commissioner. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm going to recuse myself from the executive session.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, do you want to stick around for the first part, which will just be kind of disciplinary actions, complaints, and then I'll make sure at the end part, that's when the city attorney. That work for you?
Yep.
Awesome. At the end of executive session, this meeting will be adjourned and there'll be no actionable things being done. So time right now is 9:09. I say we quick bathroom break and reconvene in 10 minutes. So that'd be 9:19. I want to thank everyone that tuned in from the public for this. Everyone that's here with us tonight, thank you very much. Happy holidays, and please wear your mask. See y'all in 10 minutes.